Yeah, thank you, Linda, and welcome everybody. This is the third meeting of the Dairy Revitalization Task Force. So before we get into it much, I wanted to let the members know that Joe Bradley is not going to be with us this morning. Had an emergency in the family over the weekend and has to be away. I want to recognize Linda as our clerk and Michael O'Grady is our legal analyst that's with us. This is our third meeting. As I said, our first meeting was May 3rd, and it was an organizational meeting which elected Dan Smith and I as co-chairs to the task force. And we had the original presentation from the Department of Financial Regulations, and that was presented by Jill Richard. She's the policy director. The second meeting we had on June 7th, we had a presentation from the Ag Agency, from the Secretary and the Dairy Division, and Laura Ginsburg from the development section of the Ag Agency. We had Agri-Mart Co-op in, Dairy Farmers of America, and Kristen Bruzois presented some facts and numbers from there. So this is our third meeting, and we have people coming from, you've all got the agenda from the different co-ops and processors that buy and purchase products from our farmers. I think before we get to our first presenter, it would be good if the committee and our guests could just introduce themselves and say who they are and who they represent. I don't know quite how to do this because we don't all see each other in the same positions on the screen, but I'll start with Dan as a co-chair, and then you can all kind of fill in, go to senators and reps, and then to the rest of the members. So Dan.
Good morning, Bobby, and good morning to the task force members and anybody else listening. Thank you very much for doing this, Bobby. I'm an attorney in Montpelier. I worked for the Legislative Council and the Agriculture Committees a number of years ago, and have worked on milk price and milk price regulation issues around the country, focusing on state roles in the pricing process.
Senator Brock.
I'm Senator Randy Brock. I represent Franklin County and a little bit of Grand Isle County in the Senate.
And Michael.
Good morning, Bobby. Good morning, everyone. Representative Michael Marcotte from Coventry. I represent Coventry, Irisburg, Newport City, Newport Town, and a part of Troy. And I'm chair of House Commerce and Economic Development.
Yeah. John.
Morning, Bobby. I'm John O'Brien. I'm a state rep, represent Royalton in my hometown of Tunbridge, and I serve on House Agriculture and Forestry. A couple things just quickly for Dan. Dan, you're down as Mia Isabella Smith.
I'm still, yeah.
Beautiful name.
Thank you.
Just for YouTube, we should probably put on Dan. And the other funny thing is I emailed a Dan Smith quickly at Legislative Council. There is a Dan Smith who is a lawyer there. So not to be confused.
In the council.
Anyway, yeah. Good morning, everybody.
John. John.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Roberts. I'm presently the Executive Director of the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, a farmer advocacy group with 150 members based in Middlebury, Vermont. Former dairy farmer, former employee of the Agency of Ag, and looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah. Heather?
Sorry. I'm Heather Darby, and I'm with the University of Vermont. I know most of the people on the call, and there's Flint. Hopefully he's allowed.
Well,
I don't
you
know.
gotta have your right.
He's listening in.
You gotta have your right-hand man with you.
Yes, yes, my right hand man. That's right.
Jackie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jackie Folsom, currently Legislative Director for Vermont Farm Bureau, 2,500 strong advocates for all sorts of ag in Vermont, and former dairy farmer. We finished milking about 10 years ago when my husband needed practically everything in his body replaced. You all know how that goes.
Yeah. Tom?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting Ben and Jerry's to the meeting here today. I'm Tom Gates, and I am the value-led dairy specialist at Ben and Jerry's. So I work with Cheryl on the Caring Dairy program management, as well as working very closely with the 50 participating farms in our program.
Yep. Cheryl?
Good morning, everybody. So as Tom said, I work closely together with him. I lead values-led sourcing for Ben & Jerry's. So that covers dairy, both in North America, but also in Europe, because we're a global company. And very happy to be here this morning to speak with you about our program.
Mateo Keeler. I'm a founder with my brother Andy of Jasper Hill Farm up in Greensboro, Vermont. We make cheese. We milk cows. We crop about 1,000 acres up here in Craftsbury, Glover, Hardwick, and Greensboro.
That must take in most of the 3 or 4 towns.
Yeah. We got a finger in all those towns, or at least a toe.
Well, I don't think I missed anybody. I introduced Michael O'Grady, who's with us, and Linda Lehman, who's also with us this morning. So we'll get right with it. We'll start off with Tom Gates. And are you and Cheryl going to present together, Tom, or separate? How are you going to work that?
So I was going to share my screen, and Cheryl was going to cover the first half, and I'll cover the back half of kind of the short presentation we put together.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. So good morning and welcome to you.
Thank you. And yeah, maybe we'll just go straight in, Tom.
Yeah, I'm just, all right, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right.
So what we thought was we would set the context just for Ben & Jerry's. We do this every time we talk about our company, regardless of who we're speaking with and what the topic is. Some of you may be familiar that Ben & Jerry's has a 3-part mission, which is our product, economic, and social mission. And the way they're shown on the slide is in a horizontal perspective, because all 3 of these legs are very important to us. And so we consider all 3 of these factors with every decision we take, regardless of the topic and what level, and it spans our entire business. So from our product mission, it's really important that we have the highest quality ingredients so that we can make the best ice cream. Really delicious ice cream. And again, that's where Vermont Dairy has come into play there. From a social mission, it's so important for us that we continue to drive being a force for good and to make the world a better place. So that again is reflected in the relationships that we establish through our value chain, the supply chain that we have. And so again, looking to see how we drive what we call linked prosperity, where everybody who touches our ingredients benefits. And then lastly, the economic mission is critical because that is actually part of the engine that drives this work. We reinvest so much into these elements on either side of us, and we are a business that again, it's important that you have all three of those pieces working well together. Next slide, Tom. So again, just from an overview perspective, we received some of the questions that we knew the committee was interested in, and so we tried to incorporate where we could and share the info that we could. As you know, we are a global ice cream brand. We're a billion-dollar brand. We have manufacturing plants here in St. Albans and Waterbury, Vermont, but we also have a site in Canada. We manufacture in the UK and the Netherlands. But here in Vermont, we are listed by the FMMO as a non-pool handler. And then our finished products are mainly conventional dairy. In our ice cream, we do have organic dairy in a line that we call Euphoria that some of you may have seen on the grocery shelves. We also do non-dairy frozen desserts. And then the newest piece is the frozen chunks that have been highly popular. But those are basically the three areas of our finished products. And this again is also a global portfolio. So we do this here in North America, but also elsewhere. From our Vermont manufacturing perspective, we buy dairy components. So we do not purchase whole milk. We don't do any of that separation or anything like that. We buy the cream and we buy the condensed skim from co-ops here in the US. And this is based on the US CME butter markets and the advanced class 2 NFS pricing. So we have a framework for this, but it's basically a lot of cream and some skim because we don't buy in the same proportion that it occurs in milk. We actually buy considerably more cream than skim. Most of these dairy components do come from Vermont and the Northeast of New York. And we, again, are sold across the US in all 50 states. Again, less than 1% of the domestic sales actually happen here in Vermont, maybe less than 0.5%. It was an interesting question because we've actually thought perhaps we actually give away more ice cream in Vermont than we actually sell because everybody seems to know someone who's connected to Ben & Jerry's and knows about our 3 pints a day mandated giveaway. So there's a lot of ice cream here in Vermont, but not all of it is sold. Next slide, Tom. So when we focus on dairy, and we've had this relationship with our legacy St. Albans farmers since inception 40 years ago. It's been an evolving relationship, and over the last 2-3 years, we really decided to focus on what were the key pieces that were critical to us. So what you're seeing now is what we call our Clover Vision, and it really represents what we believe our fans expect of the dairy and our ice cream. So our fans look at this and expect that we are really supporting dignified livelihoods for farmers and farm workers, and that there's an excellent life for cows because animal welfare is critical. Also, though, they're envisioning, again, this thriving ecosystem. And because we know dairy is sensitive now, that these farms are also acting as net carbon sinks. So this is our vision. As we continue to move towards the future, we want our fans to see that we've embraced that this is the dairy that comes from farms that are operating in this fashion. And what we realize is for us, the most effective way to leverage these sorts of elements is through regenerative agricultural practices, because soil health is so critical. It impacts all of these components of the vision. So we're really, again, looking to underpin everything we do through Regen Ag, and then looking to use policy and advocacy where we can really support the voices of our farmers and our supply chain, but also bring ourselves as buyers into the decision making and to be able to share and speak with folks like yourselves about what is really prosperous for Vermont dairy and for the state as a whole. So this again is the vision that we've had, and so we've been working towards this again more crisply for the last few years. Next slide, Tom. And so when you think about that Clover Vision in this heart here, you realize again that the impacts that we're really trying to drive is farm economic prosperity, because it's so important that these family-owned farms that are so critical to us and who we continue to want to work with are thriving. And so we're looking at the economic status and gains, and again, looking for that future track for these farms so that that resilience is built in. Healthy soils and clean water are critical, again, not just for the dairy sector and for ag, but again, for the other sectors in Vermont, like our tourism and recreation. Again, mentioned it's so important that the animal welfare is taken care of. And there's such an influx of labor coming in that we really do want to support dignified livelihoods for farm workers. And again, have this whole holistic piece working together really well so that all who are touched or impacted by our dairy in the state, again, are doing it in a healthy, viable, thriving fashion. And that, again, is good for everybody. Next slide, Tom. So just to take a step into our program, which Tom is going to speak more about, our theory of change behind this is that we do pay premiums for required practices in our program. But these premiums are really meant to be leveraged to actually push for greater economic gains for the farmers. So we have two channels for this work, the cropping practices and animal care, but both of these channels are meant to really drive up yield, improve quality while driving down cost. So the way we take these premiums into consideration is that they act as transition facilitation. They're meant to actually help support farmers do things that they already know they want to do, may not have all the cash flow or the resources to do it, including coaching, all these other elements. The farmers that we work with are very savvy, very smart, have been farming for ages, know what they're doing, and we're there to actually be that enabling piece for them to help support them in one sector, one piece of this work. There's definitely other components that are also needed, but if we can then bring those premiums into play at the right time as a cash injection for the farmers, it helps them actually turn the much bigger cogs and wheels, which will drive, again, the decommoditization and greater value capture of the dairy. Because what we really want to do is help these farmers differentiate and capture not just the values on the cream, but even on the skim. And so again, that drives greater economic gains, greater profitability, and becomes a thriving sector that future generations, et cetera, also want to be part of. So this is our grand vision and theory of change. The key takeaway from this is that the premium is almost really meant to wag the dog. It's a little bit at the beginning, but it's meant to wag this bigger change in the system. Next slide, Tom. And so when you think about our program and the Clover Vision and the outcomes, we've got, again, 4 strategic pillars. So as most of you are aware, on the dignified livelihoods, we're working with Milk with Dignity, and they work through their farm labor standard. We've also been working with Global Animal Partnership, again, as a really pioneering effort to bring third-party certification here to Vermont. And so we are their first company to onboard and adopt the standard. We were pivotal in helping them set the foundation. And that's because, again, we had such a strong standard in our own program, working with our farmers and the Vermont vets for so many years. So that provided the creativity for GAP to come in and say, let's actually take the standard and leverage. So Vermont is already now becoming a pioneer and has this historical spot of being the first community and area in the country to be adopting a global dairy standard here for GAP. And some of you may know that GAP is closely affiliated with Whole Foods. So again, it's raising the awareness. We're also leaning more into regenerative and circular agriculture. So regenerative has always, again, been picking up momentum over the past few years. And for years, we've been doing things like cover cropping. But now we're also looking to circular agriculture, which again, really drives home that local network that we're looking for, where again, you're really taking advantage of the resources that you have, but building that framework in the communities to support the farmers. So this is a key piece. And then the low carbon farming is something that has been picking up speed as well, as we're seeing more and more companies and states, and just in general with the GHG commitments, carbon footprint commitments. We've been doing methane digesters and separators now for years as well. But we're also looking to expand that work and work with our farmers, because it's important that dairy is seen not as a problem, but as the solution. And that these farms, again, as I mentioned, can become the sinks. And so you're really showing dairy for the future. Next slide, Tom.
All right. So as it relates specifically to our Caring Dairy program, which it's been around for, I guess it's been about 10 years, right around 2011 is when we initially kicked off the program. I think for Ben and Jerry's, one of the key things right from the get-go was that we really felt like, from an environmental standpoint, it was our responsibility to support those farms that were tending the land and implementing those sustainable practices, and to actually partner with the farms and collaborate, learn from each other and educate each other on different areas that Cheryl has just mentioned, with some of the key drivers really being to increase soil health, to increase soil resistance to the point where we are at a point where we can start to reduce some of the inputs, in particular synthetic inputs going onto the land, and at the same time trying to increase biodiversity through that process. So what we have here on the screen is, it's on our website. These are the Caring Dairy Program standards. Just a couple things to call out. Unless you know where you're at, it's hard to tell where you're going, and kind of that first requirement of our programming, you'll see the quantitative metric questions. All the farms in our programs are asked to complete the metric questions, which really help us and the farmers to learn and come up with new iterations of the program as we move forward. Cheryl had called out the third-party animal care program that the second half of this year we're going to be implementing as part of the program to all of the farms, and that's a global animal partnership. And I think one of the key tenets of that is that having that opportunity to have a third-party audit and to have a program that allowed for different types of farms to participate are kind of key tenets kind of under that animal care pillar. If you go down a little bit on the chart, what we call the trifecta, and this is, really focused on implementation of ag practices to help build soil health and resiliency around cover cropping, around no-till or minimum till, and then around crop rotation. That's been in place in a really big way for a little over 5 years now as part of the program. And I think you'll see on our next slide, our farmers have made a lot of progress in this area. I think with all these standards, our hope is to help move the needle in accomplishing some of the goals that Cheryl had previously mentioned. And we really do feel like there's a real opportunity to, impact things on our conventional farms here in Vermont, and for those farmers to be able to capture some value through that process. In terms of the program itself, just a couple of highlights, accomplishments over the last year. In the areas of being able to fix nitrogen, have soil cover 12 months out of the year, limiting soil disruption. You'll see here, out of the farms that participated in the program last year, 73% of the corn acres had cover crops, which I think we all know many of the benefits of those practices. Now in the bottom right-hand corner, over 75% of the corn acres in our program were the corn was planted with either no-till or shallow-till tillage. This past year, we had 21 farms that each of them did 2 different Prove It projects, which we'll get into in a little bit. But those are basically kind of taking practices from the research, academia, plots, and trying to scale them up and look for successes and in some cases failures as part of that process. And then lastly, for the last 5 years, our program has been third-party audited by where food comes from. And I think that's something that's been, of utmost importance to our fans, our consumers, as we continue to, demonstrate that we're trying to do what we say we're doing. So in 2020, we shifted our program slightly into 2 different farmer groups. And as you'll see here, first group is the farmer stewards, which makes up about half of our participants, where we have a number of very high standards, which you saw on previous slide. But then we have our farmer innovator group, where really these are the folks that are potentially the vehicle for change, where they're testing new ideas, they're demonstrating on their farms, practices and vetting them to see what works, what doesn't work, where there's economic gains. And so that's really kind of the premise for the program in 2020 when we made that shift to what was more of a tiered program in the past. So talking about the vehicle for change and within our farmer innovator cohort, one of the things that we're really excited about and proud of is what's called our Prove It projects. And as I mentioned before, these are really projects that are kind of on-farm tests where you're kind of testing on an intermediate scale, kind of scaling up adoption of a practice to see how it works in real life on the farm. And we've been able to work with a number of different specialists, including UVM Extension, Audubon Vermont, the Gun Institute for the Environment, on a number of different projects. In 2020, we had 42 Prove It projects. We have 50 Prove It projects going on here in 2021. And I would say that, some of our initial findings and learnings from this past year, because as we all know, it takes time to prove out different practices, is that early establishment of a cover crop is critical in getting the benefits to the farm that are needed through that process. And so we've worked with UVM Extension and collaborated on a number of different ways to try to get better establishment of biodiverse multi-species cover crops. And I won't get too far into it because I think somebody on your committee is more of an expert in this particular area than me by all means. But the idea is that, through that process, we want to hopefully be in a position where we can either maintain or grow yields for farmers by utilizing these. Secondly, one of the learnings through work we've done with the Gun Institute and Audubon Vermont is that there's huge opportunities within biodiversity. And all of our farms are required to have a biodiversity action plan on a percentage of their own acres on the farm. And we, this past year, we did some baseline work with those two organizations. And this year, we're in the process of implementing recommendations in those two particular areas. But at the end of the day, the idea is with the Prove It projects to vet and potentially scale the projects that are successful and that are able to demonstrate benefit. So kind of with that train of thought in mind, I think one of the questions from the committee was, how the state can support strengthening our program. And we of course have a few ideas in this particular area. And at the forefront is, we want to be able to support our family owned and operated dairy farms here in the state of Vermont. And just a few ideas that we have on where there could be opportunity for collaboration. One with our Prove It projects. In the coming years, we should have enough data to see what works well, what doesn't work well, and if there's opportunities for the states to support the scaling of potential projects or practices. We think that there's a real opportunity there. I know we talked about trying to understand where we're at to figure out where we're going as it relates to quantitative metric data on farms. If there's opportunity for the state to support in a larger way on a broader group of farms, data collection around different areas, whether it's cropping practices, whether it's around animal care, longevity, things of that nature, we think that it could be real value as it relates to kind of looking down the road for the state of Vermont. One of the up and coming topics that has really grown over the last several years is around carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. And for, particularly in the state, we've done calculations historically on trying to figure out what the best methods are to calculate on-farm GHG emissions, and collaboration and coordination with the state, we think could be very beneficial for all involved, as there's a number of dairy companies, Ben & Jerry's included, that have set a lot of science-based targets in this particular space. Next, and as it relates to animal care, we think that, you know, it's been critical over the years for our fans to be able to build trust in this area, and building that trust has been through you know, adoption of higher level practices, which I know a number of farms already are implementing, but efforts and coordination with the state on helping build that trust through third-party audits and verification, we think is important, and something that, you know, we're doing with our programming and we would like to see expanded if possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to Cheryl to get into the Vermont branding items.
Okay, thanks, Tom. So we appreciated the question about the Vermont brand, because I know it's something that we've all discussed, and I think with some of you I've discussed it as well over the last few years. We believe that there really is a strong opportunity for Vermont to be a leader in the space of thriving sustainability and regenerative ag in the minds of our fans, so in broader consumers across the country. But to do that, it's important that we are really crisp about the practices that come into play, so that it's not just a romantic notion that doesn't have the substance to back it up. And so for us, this opportunity behind the Vermont brand is for Vermont to position itself facing forward, not about the legacy of the past and that you know, bucolic idea of what we've had before, but really about taking that and leveraging that for the future and pushing into where the scientific research is needed, pushing it into areas where we differentiate for the attributes that can come through some of these practices. So we're again seeing a lot of excitement around grass-fed and what that can mean in terms of milk quality and flavor profiles. So what can we do with the state, and how can Ben & Jerry's work with partners within the state and others to look at these practices to leverage and lift the floor of the standards here in Vermont to be able to start to really become this beacon for regen ag and sustainability, but do it in a way that can actually then span the state for the dairy that comes from here. And that, in a sense, will act as a differentiator versus other states in the country, because I think when I've traveled, again, when I'm in those local communities, it means a lot to those local communities that dairy is coming from there. So in some ways, I know we sometimes say that the Vermont brand means a lot to people in Vermont. But I think that when we've discussed it with our team at B&J, there is tremendous potential, and we'd like to support that it becomes something much more than that, and also working with UVM. And so one thing we hadn't discussed, but Ben & Jerry's had put together what we have is a dairy advisory council. So we have some folks that span academia. They're also local experts in some areas, a variety of areas. And we've talked about this in terms of how does our program continue to be relevant and pushing forward where dairy needs to go. And then again, scaling that within Vermont so that it's not just about differentiation for B&J, but it is about the brand. So there's a lot to talk about, and I think there are some interesting opportunities, very specific opportunities that Tom has mentioned, but we're looking forward again to more discussion in the space of what does the Vermont brand mean. And later this week, we've had this on the calendar for a while now, but we're looking forward, and it's nice timing that we will be actually meeting with some of the members of the agency later this week in Montpelier. So it's good to continue the conversation. And with that, I think that wraps up our presentation to you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Cheryl and Tom. We've got a few minutes for questions from the members on the committee. And does anyone have a question? Any committee members? Do you have it? Jackie has her hand up. Jackie?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Cheryl and Tom. This has been an interesting conversation to have. I have several questions, but I'm going to limit it to one right now. What is the difference between the Global Animal Partnership and the FARM program that farms across the country have to adhere to? And that it seems to me it has a lot of components of what you were talking about with the Global Animal Partnership. And I guess I will take the time to ask one more. What is your definition of regenerative agriculture? Thanks.
So Tom, do you want to start with answering? And you can tackle both, Tom, and then I'll jump in if needed.
Sure. So I think that, one of the things that we've heard, from our fans over the years is that they really want to have, and animal care is the number one issue that we get through our consumer relations hotline. And as it relates to animal care, having an independent third-party standard is important to our fans. And I think FARM has continues to serve a great purpose, and I think that those standards continue to strengthen where there's continued real opportunity there. But I think for us with Global Animal Partnership, it was more about kind of having that independent, separate third-party certification around animal care that led us in that particular direction for our programming.
But doesn't FARM, I thought they had a third-party audit too. That's why I'm a little confused as to what the next step is on this. Because I know, because we've been dealing with animal welfare issues at the State House, and I've been talking to Dr. Haas, and I believe she says that there's going to be an even stronger component of animal welfare piece in the FARM coming up. But it was my understanding that that is also a third-party auditing program. So
I would just say that under GAP, every single individual farm is third-party audited as opposed to a percentage of the farms. And I know Farm is looking at, I believe it's version 5.0. It's not rolled out yet. And maybe I think there's going to be some new strengthened elements to that, which I think is going to be great in this particular space. But again, for us, it's about kind of that independent standard and the opportunity to be, basically doing audits on all the participating farms.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Is that criteria available on the website or something, or where do we find out more about that? Do they have a website?
They do, and the standard should be made public in the coming weeks. We've beta tested the standard and are going to be rolling it out on our farms in the second half of this year. So I can certainly follow up on that.
Yeah. Other committee members have a question? Dan?
Good morning, and thanks, Cheryl and Tom. So part of what we're trying to do with the task force, in addition to understand where the industry is heading in concept, is also to build out the picture of how the industry is, the just raw data, hard data on the industry operating in Vermont. So we sent you folks some basic questions about plant capacity and output, and recognizing the proprietary concern, just looking for a range. There are different size operations in the country, and if you could give us some sense of the range of capacity and output. The agency has you down in what they sent us as between 180,000 pounds and 3.6 million, which I think is some variety of receipts, but that amounts to 3.5 farms at the top end. So that's probably not too close, which I think gets to your point that you buy your milk from your product from St. Albans. And if you could just give us a little more understanding of how that works and how the pricing is set. And finally, just the basic question, the elusive question, how many pounds of ice cream can you make from 100 pounds of milk?
So thank you, Dan. And we did receive those questions. We were cautioned to share the information because we have to be careful about antitrust and collusion and putting out this information. So that's why it's not being shared at this point. But we can look back and see what sort of ranges can be shared in terms of output, because and so we do have, and perhaps the committee isn't aware of this, we also do publish a lot of the information about our business as a whole in what we call the Seer Report, which is our social environmental assessment report. And so we are working on our current one, which should be getting published within the next month, hopefully. There's a lot of data in there that can help. And there's a dairy section in there where we go into much more detail about the program, the farms, etc., and the premiums. And there's also a manufacturing section. So we can verify and double check, because everybody goes through that to make sure that certain pieces can be public, and we'll make sure then that you can have a preview of what the information will be. But as far as how much ice cream we make from the 100 pounds of milk or et cetera, we wouldn't be able to share that because that goes right into our recipe.
Well, I'm not talking about Ben and Jerry's. You guys, excuse me, are an ice cream manufacturer. So again, it's just a range. You know, if fluid milk, you take 100 pounds of milk, you can figure out generally how many pounds of beverage milk you can make from 100 pounds of milk. Doesn't matter the plant, not interested in your proprietary recipes, just as an expert in the field, just as a bench point. You know, for
back in that format. Yeah, it wasn't the way it was.
And same with the plants. You guys are operating in an environment that has a whole range of plants. So if you could pick a scale, a place to peg your plants within that overall scale and hide it. You know, nobody's interested in having an antitrust discussion, obviously, but there is a way to give some sense of what your plants are doing in the state of Vermont in terms of receiving milk. And same with pricing. You know, it's, you guys are, as you said, a non-pool plant, so you're involved in a pricing arrangement. In generic terms, how does that work? We're trying to fill out the picture that DFR gave us.
And we haven't, I'm going to go to John Roberts and then John O'Brien. And yeah, we aren't interested in your personal business affairs, but you know, we are losing hundreds of farms in Vermont. We already have in the last year or so. And the main reason that we're losing these farms is because of the price they're receiving. And we're trying to figure out a way where everybody can live. And you know, the supply control system that was set up last year to slow down the amount of milk farmers were producing, basically the way that was established, it drove a lot of smaller farmers out of business because they could sell their quota or their production level to a larger farm. And so that, you know, it's kind of the wrong message that we're giving to our farmers. You know, we like the small farms and the medium-sized farms. We don't want just 50, 2,500 or 5,000 cow farms. We like to see the cows out grazing, and our tourist industry appreciates that. But that's where we're trying to revitalize it so everybody can make a living and none have to leave us. I mean, we only got 500 and a few farms left now. John Roberts.
Thank you, Bobby. Cheryl, nice to see you again. I just to put you on the spot a little bit, following on from what Chairman Starr said. You talked about in the farm economic prosperity and spreading, I'm going to paraphrase, spreading the wealth. Have you seen that farmers who sell to Ben and Jerry's have a lower rate of going out of business than we're generally seeing? Have you seen any, you know, has your pricing mechanism slowed up the departure from the dairy industry? Is my first question. I've got a second one.
You know, that's a good question. I'm going to look at Tom because we know the attrition from our program, and we've been able to track that sort of rate. And we've got many farmers who have stayed with us, and then we know some farms have sold for a variety of reasons. But as far as comparing it to the attrition with the state itself, I'd have to check. Tom, have we tracked that and compared it?
That's something that we currently don't have information on, but certainly something that we can, look into. I would say that our retention rate within the program has been favorable.
Yeah.
But in terms of your question, I think that that's information we'd have to dig into. I mean, I certainly, there's plenty of anecdotal comments and communications from farmers about the support that we provide through our programming and the importance of it. But that's something I guess we'd have to follow up on.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And just following up a little bit on this whole regenerative agriculture question. I mean, I'm executive director of an organization whose primary purpose is improving water quality, but that also has tremendous climate benefits. We're therefore very interested, my farmer members, in, and I'm absolutely sure that some of my members are Ben and Jerry producers, but they're very interested in soil health, and so I am sort of interested in how regenerative agriculture seems to be one of these great phrases that everybody feels touchy-feely and good about, but no one really can put their finger on what it really means. And I was very interested. I sit on the Climate Council, so I'm also interested in Tom's comments about GHG calculations. But I was interested the other day when Alyssa White, who Heather knows very well and is a researcher at UVM, was asked specifically on the Climate Council, had she seen any difference between the work that's being done in regenerative agriculture and the work that's done on conventional farms, with the way they are improving their soils. And the vast majority of cover cropping is going on conventional farms. And she said so far the research has not shown that there's any significant benefit to soil health from regenerative ag over just good common sense ag.
Right.
I'm going to call it good common sense ag. That's not a phrase you can put on an ad very easily.
Yeah.
But so I just, what is your definition of regenerative ag?
Yeah, I'm picking up because I know that was the second part of an earlier question. So a couple of things on that. There's a very standard framework for regenerative ag, keeping the soil covered, minimal disturbance. If you've got animals, introducing the animals in because they're part of the cycle. So I think we know those sorts of components. What we're actually currently doing, and Alyssa, we know Alyssa because Ben and Jerry's has sort of sponsored the postdoc with Heather for that. And so we've got Alyssa looking at this work and research because we're wanting her to look at the data. And this almost again ties to Tom's point about where the state can help us, because we have data just on our farms, but we don't have the control data that necessarily to look at to have a good comparison. So I think we do want to sort of support and request assistance and sharing of a lot more of this data in terms of what's coming off from the fields. But secondly, we're also working right now, and Tom can speak a little bit more about this and build on this, to get a good understanding of how many of our farms would be considered doing regenerative ag, because there are a lot of scientists around the country that are starting to try to put together a measurement metric data framework that sort of says if a farm is doing X, Y, and Z and hitting a certain score, perhaps, or etc., then they could be considered regenerative ag. So it's almost like a shortcut toolbox survey. And so we have our team with Heather and Alyssa aware of this and working through all the data we've collected to see how this will rank as regenerative ag against this more collaborative but standardized vision of what it is, because you're exactly right. The local nature of where a farm is so critical as well. So unlike organic or some of those things where organic is very cut and dry, black and white on what it is, and everybody knows what it means elsewhere, and you sort of have the same organic practices. We think with regenerative ag, where you are locally means a lot. So if you're starting in a very rich soil, what is the space for you to improve that soil quality? Maybe you've already maxed out the carbon content and you're already doing it really, really well. So you don't need to push into that space. But then what do you do then? What else can be done about the water quality or things like that? So right now is an interesting time for us looking at our data to sort of sharpen our definition of what regenerative ag is. And if you check back with us, probably by the end of this year, we'll have the work completed. And then we'll be able to share that. But secondly, we're hoping and seeing this, that it is touchy-feely. There's other contentions around regenerative ag. There's the agroecology side, there's the indigenous side, there's the BIPOC side. So there's a lot of voices and noise coming into this. So we're being really careful about it. From our perspective, though, at its heart was just this idea of really building the soil health and seeing that improvement, because if you have that healthy soil, you cut down on your need for pesticides, fertilizers, all those things. So our angle on it was really, again, looking for the data that shows that a farmer can reduce their needs on those synthetic inputs. And if we hopefully can see and drive that reduction in that need and build up that asset under their feet, then that's where the wealth will start to be, and it starts to become the system. So that's our midterm goal, is hopefully seeing the data that will show this reduction. And it's early days, because to your point, it takes time, and that's the other side of maybe why Alyssa hasn't seen stuff. And then secondly, I think the other piece is we're just learning that a lot of the measurements are not apples to apples. And so we're trying to figure out how do we standardize that so we really can compare what is going on with the soil aggregates and all the soil organic matter, all those different pieces.
Thank you.
Oh, was that? Okay, good. Thanks. Okay.
Yeah. We've got to push along. John O'Brien, I think you had a question.
Thanks, Bobby. Cheryl and Tom, with Ben & Jerry's being this billion-dollar global company, I thought it's interesting that we finally have a chance for you to speak about looking at all your farms, how they compare to Vermont farms. So I assume you're accessing milk in Canada, UK, Netherlands, maybe even other European countries. And I just wondered how farms outside this country, the dairy farms, are doing, both, speak to the Clover Vision. Do they seem more stable? Are they ahead of us in some areas? Are they behind us? I'd just love to hear more about that.
Oh, and we'd love to have, and I know we'll be close to time having another conversation, but exactly right, John, there is this difference. So we have our Caring Dairy program also in Europe. So we do access other dairy in Canada for the Canadian manufacturing, but we use the mass balance thing. So instead of working directly with Canadian farmers in the program, we've done the equivalent volume and worked with our Vermont farmers here. So currently we're working with more farmers in Vermont than necessarily the dairy that comes into our ice cream, because we've expanded the programming here, if that makes sense. But in Europe, we've got the program, because of just the way it was set up, we're working with Dutch farmers, German farmers, British farmers, and now Belgian farmers as well. So we'll be getting a lot of data. Just in general, the Dutch farmers are smaller farms. They do much more grazing. So in some ways, you could say they're a little bit ahead from a regen ag perspective. They're already pushing hard on the circular economy pieces, but their state, they get so much support from the state. The regulations are very different. And so there's a lot more financial resource and support for the farmers there, for them to have a higher floor as well as a higher ceiling to move towards. And here in the US, it's very, very different. We were working with farms out west for a while, and then we moved all that manufacturing back to Vermont. So again, even the differences in the US are very different. But we can definitely share with you more, because we're trying to drive some holistic view of dairy as a whole with how to do it, but realizing the program in Vermont, because you're literally like, it's the heart and soul of our dairy in so many ways, because it's just down the road. Our legacy is here. We've got such long relationships, really looking to pioneer with our farmers here, and then hoping some of that will go across the pond as well. And so generally we've been, in terms of the program structure, more pioneering. The Farmer Innovator program that Tom talked about, we started here, and our farmers were the guinea pigs in a sense, but now we're going to take that to the Netherlands, and we're going to start working with innovator farmers there. But we're trying now to also bring learnings from the Netherlands here and really cross-pollinate, because it's important. And just really quick, I think even years ago, we've had farmer exchanges, and Tom was actually part of it, where the Dutch farmers came here and back and forth. And so again, we're hoping in the future we'll do that, and it could again be with the German farmers and the UK farmers. maybe I'll stop there, yeah. But we're happy to have a deeper conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. And we have one more question. Heather, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I think Cheryl kind of answered it, and maybe also might not know. I was just more curious how, you know, Vermont farms themselves look environmentally or regeneratively compared to farms, you know, other farms that you work with. And I think you were trying to answer that already. And I guess I'll just say part of the reason I asking that question is because what I clearly see in my travels is that Vermont farms really stand above other dairy farms, not all of them, you know, across the country in the standards that they're held to. And I just keep thinking about that. And we keep asking them to be held to even higher standards in our state, but they don't have much reward for doing that. And now, you know, with conversations, lots of conversations about climate change in our state and thinking that farmers are going to need to be held to even more higher standards, I just keep wondering, where's the payback for that in the marketplace? And if our farms are truly that much ahead of the rest of dairy in the country as a whole, how do we capitalize on that if that's truly what people want? And I know when you're in Vermont, you don't see everything outside of Vermont the way that folks like you that are traveling the world, or folks like me that just get around. And I guess that's what I just keep thinking about during all these conversations, is that our farmers are really special here, partly because they have been asked to do so much and they have done so much. And we keep saying that that's what people want, but how do we capitalize on that for those farmers so that they can stay in business and keep achieving, you know, all these great services for the better good? So
I'll just quickly say thank you, Heather, because you're right. I think you and I've had these conversations where it's, I think, getting into that Vermont brand idea a little bit, because the capture, the value capture comes through that, whether it's through a buyer and a product that we make or the farmer selling to a variety of customers, but it's being able to really provide concrete substance to your point about the farms looking different, but how are they different, and being able to demonstrate that they are actually standard requirements that all farms must do this or comply with this, versus the fact that our farmers have exceeded so many things. But if we're able to sort of capture that in a very regulated, mandated fashion somehow, and that becomes synonymous for farming in Vermont, then the companies like mine are able then to take that into telling the story and then driving that value capture in the marketplace, which then goes beyond just ice cream fans, right? Then it becomes the choice of everybody else. But they start to see that's what Vermont Dairy stands for. And it's more than just a provenance, but it's an idea of provenance, but it actually is translated, right? So because I know, and you've said that, I mean, we've had the conversations where our farms themselves, the soil is already super healthy in so many of our farms when you've looked at the measurements compared to the national averages. But then that comes out into how do we communicate this and how do you get those stories out, not just in academic circles, but in something that a consumer or someone is willing to actually pay for at the register, because that then cascades back. And then of course,
I was going to say, I just sort of keep thinking about this, you know, sort of broader campaign for our farmers, just like you talk about, because it's, you know, it's not just caring dairy farmers that are doing these practices, but we have not, and they are mandated to do so much.
Yeah.
But that's the only way we look at it, as mandates and regulation, instead of looking at it as actual opportunity. And how do we take that, all these things that the farmers are doing and now have to do, and make that an opportunity for them to stand out in the marketplace as a whole, so that it benefits the farmer that sells, you know, their own yogurt or Jasper Hill cheese that has this, you know, a broader touch with their cheese, or Ben & Jerry's that has this global touch or nationwide touch, that people just know that's who Vermont farms are as a whole. And it goes back to that seal of quality or Vermont seal of quality that needs to have more back to it than just, you know, there are Vermont farms that create excellent dairy products, but they also create this. And I just don't feel like we've taken that opportunity. So thanks for bringing that up with my nudge.
Yeah, Mr. Carlson, I hope you can hang with us here for a few extra minutes. Sorry to keep you waiting. Maybe Cheryl, you said you have a manufacturing plant in Canada. I don't know if it's Quebec, Ontario, or where.
It's Ontario.
Well, a lot of us live right on the Vermont-Quebec border. And certainly we all know and understand that Canadian farmers get paid a lot more for their milk than our US farmers. And if you're up in Ontario making ice cream, I would think that the price of the milk or the cream that you buy or the dairy components that you purchase has got to be much higher than what they cost here in the US. And I'm wondering, does that drive the end product up to the consumer a lot higher or any higher? Or is there any way you can tell us about that?
I'll have to check it. The pricing is different in Canada for a variety of reasons. It's a much smaller market. The Canadian marketplace is small. The Canadian dollar exchange is in there. I'm Canadian, so I'm actually from Toronto. So I actually was looking at our Ben & Jerry's on the shelves, and it is a higher price point there, but there are a lot of factors. But we also export as well from here some of our ingredients, and so we hit under certain quotas. So I'm sure, again, between sugar, dairy, but also brownies and cookie dough, those things all cross the border back and forth within a certain allowed quota. So I think it's more complicated on our bill of materials on Canada, but you are right in saying that the Canadian farmers, because of the whole supply management process they have there on pricing and their quotas, are not in the same position as our farmers are here with our pricing structure. But when Ben & Jerry's has looked at some of these pieces, when we sort of thought about different formulations in terms of different types of dairy, for sure there would be an impact on the price of the pint in the freezer. And so I think those are the sorts of things we're always considering when we think about the practices that we want to bring on board. And so it's not at a scope to think that we would be raising the price of something if we were trying to do a pint that was perfect in every way, complete, no GHG, zero footprint, blah, 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 blah. So we're trying to build and understand what does all of that look like and how do we demonstrate that and sort of show this even to consumers, because this is when you start to get into the true price of food, true cost accounting, and it spans beyond dairy. It gets into a lot of the other parts of my work, which are about labor and cocoa. Like, there's just so many supply chains that have so many challenges, and just through economies of scale and the structures that are in place, a lot of it goes through. So where we see the opportunity is in educating consumers and educating the stakeholders that are in this, because we want to work both on the push as well as the pull. And if we educate our fans, and again, this goes back to what Heather's saying, if you educate the fans and you educate consumers in the marketplace about what Vermont Dairy stands for, and they create that pull and create a demand for it, and we've got the push where we've got the supply, then those two should come together. So it's a bit of a tangent on your conversation, Senator Starr, about the pricing, but I think we're open to looking at some of those opportunities where, along with all the factors of our business we have to consider when we do our pricing, looking at the cost of ingredients and how to, again, try to really ensure that we're supporting people being paid fairly throughout the supply chain, from the farmer to everyone who handles it all the way up. So.
Yeah.
So we're going to have many more conversations. Like I said, we're talking to the state this week, and we'd love to engage further and to work closely, because we know we're a big presence in the state, and would like to continue to elevate our purchase in the state. And we're growing, and as we've been growing, hence why we've had to expand, because we've been purchasing all the cream that was made available to us. But again, as we grow, we're going to need more. So
Yeah.
that's where we're at.
Well,
Yeah.
we can't supply that if we keep losing farms. That's,
No,
we
I
all
know.
know.
Yeah, and that's it shows the mutual dependence we all have on each other, right? We need the farmers as much as they need us, and we need to really strengthen that so we work together. And that I can tell you, Ben & Jerry's leadership is strongly behind us on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, and you're welcome, both Tom and Cheryl. Welcome to stay on if you can. But we're going to switch gears and to Mr. Carlson from Brattleboro, I believe, with Commonwealth Dairies. And thank you two very much for your time with us this morning. And we've got, more meetings, and we may have to call on you again for info as we move forward with our task force. So thanks again, and you're welcome to stay. So, Mr. Carlson, welcome to the task force. I don't know if you were on when we all introduced ourselves, but you can see our names and probably pick up from that. We've already cut into your time, but we appreciate you staying with us. So welcome, and we'll be glad to hear from you in regards to your operation in Brattleboro.
Well, thank you, Senator Starr. And I'm sorry, no, I had to step out of another meeting to come here, so I wasn't part of the introductions. But we don't need to spend time going around the room. I see the names, and people can reach out to me directly if they want to follow up on things. But my name is Rolf Carlson. I'm the Vice President of Milk Sourcing, Sustainability, and Corporate Quality for Lactalis U.S. Yogurt. So with the Commonwealth facility in Brattleboro falls into that scope. So I'm actually based in Londonderry, New Hampshire, where our Stonyfield yogurt facility is. So across state lines, but neighbors, and a lot of milk from Vermont comes to our facility here in Stonyfield. I kept my presentation narrow to the Brattleboro facility, but I do offer to the task force here follow-up discussions on our facility in Londonderry and the organic milk we purchased there, and dairy that we're doing here in New England for the Londonderry facility. Okay, what I'd like to start with maybe is just a few slides. And I can't share slides here.
Linda, would you make Rolf a co-host so he can show his slides?
He's a co-host now.
Okay, very good. I just have a few slides to share with the task force here. Okay, can the folks see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought I'd just give a little bit of a background about Lactalis, because it's a rather large dairy company, but privately held in a very quiet company. Okay, so Lactalis is a third-generation family-owned dairy company that's transnational and global. It's founded in 1933 by a gentleman named André Beignet in Western France, in a town called Laval, not too far, about an hour and a half away from Normandy. Okay. And the business transitioned from grandfather to father to son. And right now, the grandson of the founder, Emmanuel Beignet, is running the company since the year 2000, when his father passed away from a heart attack. Okay, just to give you some key figures, and this may amaze people here, but it's a very large dairy company, 85,000 employees around the globe in 85 countries. Okay, 266 factories in 51 countries, and 44 billion pounds of milk collected globally. I would say that's probably around a little over 20% of the total milk produced in the United States. and annual gross revenues of $25 billion. Zooming in a little bit to the United States, you can see the acquisitions of companies that Lactalis purchased over the years, the timeline. So starting back in 1995, revenues in the United States were $500 million. By 2017, they had grown to 1.7 billion. And then just most recently with a significant acquisition of the Kraft Heinz natural cheese division, it's projected to be $3.7 billion. But you can see, Stonyfield was acquired in 2017 by Lactalis. And you can also see in 2019 was the acquisition of the Commonwealth Dairy. So they have two facilities, one in Brattleboro, Vermont, and Casa Grande, Arizona. And in between there, you can see there was an acquisition of Siggy. So there was a very aggressive plans to acquire what they call culture products or yogurt companies by Lactalis over the last several years. Then also some of the brands, and again, zooming in on the United States, is, global brands are the President's butter, Galbani, mostly cheeses, Italian cheeses, and Parmalat fluid milk. And those are the global brands. Down at the bottom, you can see some of the brands domestically in the United States. Again, total revenue. This slide is not up to date. It does not take into consideration the Kraft Heinz acquisition. So this is before that. I think there's 3 other factories that were added with that acquisition. And, so these numbers have to be updated, but this is just prior to the acquisition of the Kraft Heinz, which is still going through Department of Justice approval. And then just the last slide is, and I know this is part of the questions here, is where does the milk come from going into Brattleboro? And the little blue bubbles there represent farms and the size of the farms that are coming into the Brattleboro facility. I believe there's about 67 farms that source. Generally, all the milk comes from Vermont. I can't testify that is 100% because sometimes based on demand and seasonality, we may get some milk out of Vermont, but I would say generally day in and day out, most of the milk is coming from Vermont. Any questions so far that people may want to ask on that, or that was the last slide I had.
Do you buy your milk from co-ops or direct from farmers?
Okay, so I'll jump into, I actually, would you want me to follow the questions that you had shared with me, that Linda had shared with me?
Sure.
Okay, so your first question there, Senator, was that, you just asked was on, we get our milk from a co-op relationship. Okay, so we do not buy it for the Brattleboro facility, we do not buy any milk directly from farms. All the milk that's coming into the factory is from the farms. Okay, it's not going through a processor indirectly before coming into the Brattleboro facility. Okay, so it's all cooperative relationship milk. As far as milk purchases are concerned, we're around 110 million pounds of milk forecasted for this year. Okay, and all I'm familiar with is, let's say, the last couple years of the relationship with the Commonwealth facility in Brattleboro. But I believe when it was first launched, it was successful beyond anybody's expectations, and there was a lot of growth. Then it ran into a period of some volume declines over the last several years. And I would say since 2019, when the acquisition occurred, we have been trying to revitalize and grow the plant. And volume in 2020 over 2019 was up almost 17%. And this year we're projecting it to be over 6% over the prior year. Okay. So then some of the question was actually milk pricing. I can't get into specific details because of confidentiality regarding the milk price. But what I can say, it is based on the federal order system class structure plus premiums. Okay. So we ascribe to the federal order system in our pricing. We are not a pooled facility. Okay, we only are producing class 2 products. You need to be a class 1 facility, fluid milk, to be a federally ordered pooled plant. Our milk purchases, though, are tracked by the milk marketing administrator out of Boston in the pool. So that is tracked, and it's part of the statistics and the statistically uniform prices that are published every month. Okay. The question was about the premium. Well, we don't get explicit details as far as what the composition of the premium is for the milk above class 2. So some of these things are assumptions for me, but I believe it's the transport, the collection, administration, quality, and then there may be some other that I do not know about. But I think you folks have been speaking to some of the cooperatives in the area, and they can give you a better view on the premium structure and whether that covers costs or not there. As I showed you in the slides, most of the time the milk coming into the Brattleboro plant is from Vermont. I would say there are some chances of being non-Vermont milk, again, based on seasonality of production and demand and how the co-op is moving the milk, but it's mostly from the Champlain Valley in the northern tier. You asked about the products produced there. The facility in Brattleboro is almost exclusively a Greek yogurt facility. So Greek yogurt jumped into the industry in the dairy category around 14 years ago. And Greek yogurt distinguishes itself from other yogurts in that it's a separated yogurt. So you generally process a yogurt in a tank, you ferment it in a tank, and then run it through a separator. What that does is removes whey as a byproduct, and it concentrates the yogurt, making it higher protein and lower sugar, because a lot of sugar, lactose, goes out with the whey. So the plant, and I think one of your questions later on is, what is the ratio of milk to the finished product? It generally, in the Greek yogurt business, it takes 3 parts of milk to make 1 part of yogurt. Okay, so when you're buying Greek yogurt at the store, if it's competing for, let's say, a cup set yogurt or stirred yogurt, there's generally more dairy in there. Okay, more protein and more milk went into making that product. Regular yogurts generally are fortified greater than, let's say, the skim value of the milk, but not a 3-to-1 level. So it's a Greek yogurt, which is trained. About a rough estimate of our business is 70% is private label and around 30% is branded. Okay, so we make a lot of our products for private label customers. It's a very competitive market, very demanding, very, how should I say, cost-driven business. So it's difficult to it's very competitive. Our products are distributed nationally, okay? And as far as I would say as the size of a yogurt facility, it's small to maybe mid-size. You have a lot of smaller boutique yogurt companies around the country, but if you're looking at some of the larger players, the Danones of the world, the Chobani's, the Yoplai's, their facilities are generally much larger. When I say much larger, they're probably around 200 million pound production facilities of finished product. Okay, and the facility in Brattleboro, I would say right now is around 40 million pounds of product. So we're basically 1/5 the size of, let's say, some of the big players' plants. Okay, just a little bit more of a background on Brattleboro. We have 125 employees there. Lactalis is very much committed to the facility. Between 2020 and 2021, we made $8.1 million of investments. whether it's to, make the lines expand capacity, put streamlining, automation in there, but then also to focus on energy and wastewater there. And we're projected around another $4.4 million in 2021. So, one thing I want to share is that there's a strong commitment to the facility and growing it. Right now, I would say we have over 30% room to grow capacity. There are some constraints or limits to us right now. Labor is difficult in Vermont. We have, the job market. It seems we have a bit of turnover, and I think we pay a competitive wage. We've taken up wages in that facility over the last 2 years. I'd say a decent amount, but we have turnover, and we need a degree of skilled labor. So we're very much interested to work with the state on securing labor. We have some limits on wastewater output, and we're working on that also. And one other observation as far as cost, because we compete with facilities around the country. Our utility costs in Vermont are generally a bit higher than what we've observed around the country. So, so I would say limits or challenges to growth on there. Okay. So additional capacity, we can grow. We can produce in excess of 50 million pounds. We're telling you we're a little bit below 40 million pounds utilized. And our milk going into there could be then in excess of 150 million pounds. So an ability to grow over 30% on the milk. I would say, though, we're a small facility. I would say we're less than 5% of the milk being produced in Vermont. Okay. But hopefully people think we're important because we process the Vermont milk in Vermont. Less than 5% of our production, I would say, is sold locally in Vermont. We are distributed nationally. So in excess of our 95% of our production goes out of the state. Okay. So that's good. We're an exporter of Vermont milk and Vermont dairy. We do not ship any product internationally. Okay. And so it's just U.S. domestic. Okay. You had a question about Vermont branded. We do not leverage that. Again, as the product is distributed nationally, it would be good to talk about the Vermont attributes, but depending where you are in the country, it may not be well understood or well appreciated. We do have the Green Mountain Creamery brand, which is local, tying to Vermont, the Green Mountains. And I think there may be an appreciation for that, but it's not a large, not a significant part of our portfolio as far as production is concerned. Okay. You asked the question if there's any organic milk going into Brattleboro. No, but I can tell you, what is it? Maybe, I don't know how the distance is to Londonderry, but maybe 70, 80 miles to the east. We are bringing in probably around 150 million pounds of farm organic milk in on an annualized basis. A good chunk of that is coming from Vermont. Okay. Let's see. Most of the milk that goes into all the milk that goes into Brattleboro is coming from the farm. So on farm trucks. So it's raw milk. That milk that's received in is separated to skim milk. And most of the cream is sold because most of the Greek yogurts are fat-free or low fat. So we do generate cream as a byproduct. And as of late, since the beginning, that lactose was part of the relationship. We utilize a broker to move that cream, which stays in the general area. I can't say it stays in New England, but I think some of it's going into New York, but it's not going too far. I think I went rather quickly, but I believe I covered most of the questions that were on the list. I don't know if I missed anything.
Yeah, you've done well. Done well. Yeah, you use a lot of Vermont milk then, and up in the Champlain Valley, Northeast Kingdom. I see a lot coming right out of where I live down 91 to you guys. Questions from committee members or Commonwealth? So a question.
There's a question there, I believe. I think there's a question someone's raising.
Dan, did you have a question?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Dan.
Thank you, Ralph, for your comprehensive presentation. Very helpful. Really appreciate it. If the milk is received at your plant, so for the federal order, you're the plant of initial receipt rather than St. Albans, where it doesn't go there and then get diverted to you. Correct. It comes in. The cooperative handles the collection and transport into the facility in Brattleboro, but it's farm milk. It's milk that was picked up on the truck at the farm and then delivered directly into Brattleboro. And for that reason, the class 2 sets is the basic minimum price for your pricing structure. Correct. Okay. All righty, and thank you for that. And interested in your discussion about the Vermont branding. Roger Albee and I met with the founder a couple of years ago, and he said that the Vermont branding was pivotal to his decision to establish the plant in Vermont. I wonder if, when you say national, he seemed to think that there was a market opportunity with the proximity to Boston. So whether that factors into your calculations and between Boston and New York and the rest of the country in terms of the product's appeal. Well, so one piece I think I mentioned was the degree of how much products is private label. So when we're producing it for a customer, they will generally specify what they want on the label or not. Okay, and we do share with them, about the facility, where the milk is being sourced from. But it's a lot of that is a decision. I would say, the Green Mountain Creamery. So we have the story of produced locally with local milk. We're working to grow that brand, but it still does remain relatively small. I think there's value there. I think when I joined part of the earlier discussion there, I think it would be great to define what are some of the values of that proposition. Yes, there's, it's coming from smaller family farms in Vermont that, people are generally more ecologically conscientious and caring about, the animal welfare and the farms and in generational transfers. But it would be good to better develop what that value proposition is to the consumer, so that processors like the Commonwealth facility can leverage that, those attributes. Bobby, if I could, just one follow up is since Lactalis has all this very yogurt production, is there any assessment of the intrinsic qualities of Vermont or New England milk as compared to milk supplied to other plants? Certainly here in discussion over the years that not just from a branding standpoint, but from an intrinsic quality, the milk made in Vermont is different. Does that come up at all in any assessment you folks have done? I would, so if you look at standards, let's say of quality, I have not done a comparison, let's say Vermont milk compared to other regions or other parts of the country. Again, when you're looking at the microbial, let's say somatic cell count or other quality indicators, that varies farm to farm and, by, what the specifications of the processor are. I would say that would take a greater penetration if a lot of the Vermont milk was, let's say, more pasture-based or raised. To be able to substantiate claims there of the value, you'd have to do more testing and research to validate
those values. The omega-3 and 6 ratios, or the amount of CLAs present in more pasture-raised dairy, is out there. But to be able to make those claims, you'd have to test and gather that data over a period of time. Otherwise, you're subject to potentially lawsuits for making claims that are not substantiated. So I think with Vermont, a lot of the farms are pasture-based, but then there are some that are not as heavily pasture-based. So there has to be a segregation of that milk. And partly why Stonyfield is organic. There are very well-defined standards about the attributes of access to pasture, what the animals are fed, and the treatments given for their health. So with Stonyfield, we try to maximize those attributes. But then if Vermont wanted to do other, what you were saying, maybe Dan, some intrinsic ones, you're going to need to back them up with hard data for people to make claims.
Well, I really appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Jackie, you have a question?
Thanks, Senator. Thank you, Rolf. This has been really interesting. Can you tell me at the point that Lactalis purchased the Brattleboro, the Commonwealth plant, what the ratio of was private label to the Green Mountain yogurt? Because I thought, and I thought that's where Dan was going, was that when this first came in, it was to promote the Vermont brand of yogurt. And I thought that, I guess I was a little surprised that there was so much private label going on as opposed to promoting the Vermont yogurt.
Yeah, I don't know the exact figures there, Jackie. But my understanding is that the Brattleboro facility quickly outgrew their capacity or their capabilities based on success of sales. And I think a lot of that was driven by what the folks at Brattleboro prior to the acquisition were able to do with private label. Okay, so I think it's set out to have the Green Mountain Creamery brand, and I think I don't know whether that went according to plan or not. I think it did very well. But then the other piece is that, they were at the right place at the right time with the boom in Greek yogurt, okay, starting around 2008. They built a few years later, but, the growth engine for the yogurt category in the early 2010s was Greek. That has sort of plateaued and come down. And that, and when Lactalis made the acquisition of the Brattleboro facility, they were seeing some of that trend of adjustment for the Greek business. So I don't know, I do know a little bit of the history there, and I do know they grew the Green Mountain Creamery brand, but I don't know what the exact expectations were as far as percentage wise for the business.
Thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome.
We have John O'Brien with a question.
Just observation and a question. One, my observation is just as the food shopper for our family, here I am at Market Basket, I think last week in Claremont, and I'm pushing a cart around, and I'll buy like Siggy's yogurt drink and Presidente Brie and Stonyfield yogurt. I had no idea they were all the same company. And I don't think most shoppers probably know that either. But that made me think, Rolf, at your plant with all that private production, or it ends up with private companies, which I guess is sort of similar to, say, the Harpoon Brewery in Windsor makes Harpoon beer, but they also make beer for other smaller companies. How does that work with you acquiring milk? Do you, if you can get milk at 1500 instead of 18, is that passed along to those companies, or are they really just paying, a sort of base price, and you make that Greek yogurt for them?
Yeah, so I have gone out and checked the price. I think we are getting a competitive market price for the milk in that area into the Brattleboro facility. with our private label customers. They generally, some of them have run with us for years. Some of them are, they put the business out to bid on an annualized basis. And, we're not competing, let's say, with other dairy processors in New England, or let's say the North Atlantic state areas. We're doing that generally around the entire country. So, one of my observations when you were talking with Cheryl and Tom is, I'd encourage the Vermont the state to look at national pricing, the national situation, because a lot of processors, that's what they're having to deal with. Okay. And, consumers are brand loyal. They like product, make a high quality, a good product, but they're very value driven as well. So, they're very conscientious of their pocketbook and how much they can spend or are willing to spend at the grocery store. And so, something that is always in the back of our heads is how are we competing out of Brattleboro with other facilities around the country. And, one of our desires is to grow that facility, because as we put more pounds in there, some of the fixed cost structures are spread over more pounds. So we have a better margin, but also a better ability to compete against some of these larger players.
Yep.
I believe, we are paying a competitive price for the milk, but I would say our competition is on a national basis.
Yeah, thank you. I believe Heather has a question.
Yes. Hi, Mr. Carlson. Nice to meet you.
Please go by Rolf.
Okay, you can call me Heather. I don't know if anybody's ever called me Mrs. Darby before. But anyway, so I'm just thinking about a lot of things that you're saying, and wondering, you're kind of thinking about trying to maybe expand. Are there areas of expansion that are of interest to Commonwealth that you're not being able to meet because maybe you need more information, or the right kind of milk or quality of milk, or something value add that if you had that information or that type of milk, you talked about CLAs and things like that all of a sudden you'd be able to create a new product line or bring on more milk from farms in Vermont, because it was of this X quality to make some kind of specialty product. Are there any opportunities like that?
Well, so if you looked at the Lactalis US yogurt portfolio of products, we have the entire spectrum. We're going from organic. We also produce in Londonderry some non-GMO products out of our Brown Cow brand. Then we have the Green Mountain Creamery, which is local, but then we're doing private label. So it goes the spectrum, I would say, of the milk. We do not buy BST milk. We have that as a minimum, but we go all the way from the spectrum of conventional all the way to organic. And we also produce some products in the Midwest, organic grass-fed, all right, which is a higher percentage of grass-fed yogurt or dairy. I would have to say one side is that's driven by the consumer, okay? And ideally, we would like to go, how should I say, as much as possible to the higher end spectrum of the value added milk, ultimately to organic. I've been at Stonyfield for 15 years, and our goal would be to have the entire dairy industry in organic, but we have to follow what the consumer trends are. So we're constantly looking at the types of milk, the treatment of the animals. I came in, I think when people were talking a little bit about animal welfare. Some of these are just table stakes or entry point stakes. We have consumers now, whether it's conventional or organic, are looking for very minimum standards or of animal welfare and care. And the farm labor. And those standards are pretty high. So the consumers are becoming more demanding, and it's actually a minimum point of entry. Ideally, we'd like to continue along that spectrum. I came in when there was a discussion about regenerative agriculture, and I don't know if we have time, but there's a woman on our staff here at Stonyfield, Britt Lundgren. I think you know her, Heather.
Yeah.
Our director of sustainable agriculture and government affairs, and she's been working and driving a wonderful project up in Freeport, Maine, with Wolf's Neck Farm. And there was discussion about what is regenerative agriculture. I think that was an excellent question, and that needs to be further defined and developed. And part of the work that they're doing at Wolf's Neck is to get that base data and in the software and the systems that can take that data, collect it, and then quantify it, and then turn it into a demonstrable result to talk to whether it's consumers or governmental agencies. I think one of the best benefits of regenerative agriculture and an opportunity for farmers is the sequestering of carbon into the soil. Okay, people are talking about the healthy land or pastures. Okay, we're seeing a lot about the desires to reduce global warming. The work being done at Wolf's Neck and well-managed farms is along that line. And we believe farmers will be able to, dairy farmers down the road will be able to make the claim that farming sustainably, but sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. And that could be a value add proposition for the farm. Okay, you just imagine, a carbon-based society where, there's charges for carbon or credits for carbon. And if a dairy farmer is managing their farm responsibly, they are sequestering, and may be entitled down the road to some payments for sequestering that carbon, removing it from the atmosphere. So, I don't know how many more committee meetings you folks are having, but I gladly invite Britt to attend to dive into that to a lot more detail. But what we're doing at Stonyfield and with Wolf's Neck is a very bold initiative that hopefully will provide benefit to the environment, but also to the farmers.
Yep. Any, Randy, Senator Brock?
Just a question as far as your company is concerned. What could Vermont do as a matter of policy today that would make our products more valuable to you than products sourced from another state or another area? Is there anything that would make Vermont milk able to be differentiated from milk that you buy elsewhere now?
That's an excellent question. There's a lot of people out there doing that already. Like I said, we have the organic, and that is one significant point of differentiation. And I think the amount of organic dairy in Vermont compared to the ratio to conventional versus other states in the country, you folks have done a wonderful job of building the organic dairy. Okay, it's still relatively small, but it's far higher than other parts in the country. Then, other types of the milk, but I believe would be working collaboratively with processors like Ben & Jerry's and Lactalis to identify that and communicate that. I guess, understanding what differentiates Vermont from the rest of the country, and then being able to demonstrate that or quantify it so those claims can be made. I wish, Senator, right now I had a great creative idea, but I don't. On the other end, though, one thing I think the state could look at is how is the milk utilized? Because in the Northeast, in Federal Order 1, there's at times when there's excess supply of milk going into manure pits. Okay, so that is costing the farmers, the cooperative, and eroding margins. Okay, so having better ways to utilize milk and not having it, the crops raised, the animals raised, the cows milked, and then the milk just turning around being put into a manure pit because there's no viable outlet. That is, I don't know if that has been brought up to you folks or not, but it's a cost that's being borne ultimately by the farmers that they have to absorb, and it's a loss of their margin and profitability and viability.
Yes. Heather, I think, had another questions. Are you still with us, Heather?
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering if, is there room in the organic marketplace? Because it seems like it's been pretty shut down, just meaning, farmers haven't been able to transition to organic. There's a lot of advocacy from, various people, organizations for farmers to, as a means to get better pay prices and have these sort of labeling standards that they transition to organic. But I mean, it doesn't seem like there's really been room for more. So that's my first question. What does that look like, if you could talk about that? And then we see losses of all types of farms, including organic. And I would say we've seen quite a loss of organic farms over the last, probably 4 or 5 years, far more than we did before, because pay prices did decline drastically for those folks as well. And an older generation of farmers that are organic too, just, like time to cut the losses and retire, whether they're organic or conventional. Any comments on any of that?
So this is just my perspective, okay? Around 5 years ago, there was a significant addition of organic milk put into the market across the United States. I've been at Stonyfield for around 15 years. And prior to that, there was never enough organic milk. But in 2016, around then, there was an onslaught, a rush of milk. And the organic dairy industry generally had been very thoughtful about how much milk was being added, to keep the supply tight, or at least following demand. For some reason, the market exploded in 2016. And I would say, Heather, it's been at least 5 years to work off that excess volume. I believe in 2019, there was 10% more organic milk than being produced than what was being used. Okay, so it took a number of years to work that off. We are getting into, I would say, a better balance. So hopefully there's going to be a degree of stability for those farmers, for the organic farmers are concerned. Zooming in, particularly to the northeast, where I lose sleep is where is organic supply going, because we see that as well, as far as the older generations getting out, or the younger generations not coming in, and that worries me, and it's organic has always been an option for, let's say, conventional farmers to maybe find another way and have a higher value add. We're committed to the organic here in Londonderry. I told you both, we have everybody here. We have a facility here in Londonderry, the one in Brattleboro. There's tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars invested in it. So it's very much in our interest to have a robust and vibrant dairy in the area. But one of the challenges, and again, I encourage you folks at the state to look at, is what's happening nationally. I've seen a lot of growth of organic and larger farms out west, Heather. And there are larger farms there. Why are there larger farms in Vermont? It's the cost of production, and maybe the larger farms can better some of the ups and downs as well too. But it's a little concerning to me and worrying. And I think it is going to take a collaborative effort of the farmers, the handlers, and the processors to try to come up with some solutions here. Otherwise, it will continue on this trajectory here.
We have one quick question, John, because we're running a little bit behind. One more question.
Very, very quick question, Ralph. Do you have any idea what Lactalis's view would be on a supply management system across the country?
Hold on one second here. What would Lactalis's view? Lactalis, how should I say, has been very laissez-faire, follow the market to some extent, okay? They are very concerned, I think I heard it earlier today, is they are concerned about the farmer making a livable wage, okay? So it has to work across the entire supply chain. I would say what Lactalis does and what we do here in the United States is very much to focus on the value proposition we have. If you look at their business, they're a dairy company, so heavily vested in dairy. So as dairy goes, Lactalis goes. And, so we try to really talk about the attributes of dairy, of the farmers, and, the relationships we have. And we want genuine relationships. We want good relationships. We don't want, like I said, us producing products at the expense of someone else in the supply network, most importantly being the farmer. So, so I would say Lactalis's position is that we want a livable wage for the farmers. We're very much concerned with that. At the same time, we have to be cognizant of what's going on in the marketplace, because if we deviate too much from that, again, I talked about it earlier, consumers are very price conscious. The minimums are, good quality, it tastes good, but, then you can hurt your business and be on a downward trajectory if you price yourself too far out. Okay, so I think your point is, again, it's going to need to be a collaborative effort. And then, dairy competes with other foodstuffs. So, again, Lactalis tries to emphasize, the nutrient density of dairy products versus other products. What you're getting on your shelf. Why fill yourself with empty carbs and unhealthy carbs. We feel that dairy products are a very healthy part of people's diets and important. And so I think that's where we try to leverage is the value of the product to the consumers.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ralph, and really appreciate your time that you've given us. And it's been very very thoughtful testimony that you gave us. And as I told the previous speakers, we still have many more meetings to do. And once we get to where we can start organizing our thoughts and where we as a committee want to go, we may want to call you back, and hopefully you'll have time to be with us.
Yes, you're more than welcome to call me back. I would say if you want a much more detailed, in-depth, knowledgeable, cogent discussion on the regenerative agriculture, bring Britt Lundgren in, all right? And if you want to learn more about Stonyfield, I'd gladly talk about that as well in detail.
Yeah, well, thanks again. Thank you very much. And have a good day, and we'll move on. You're welcome to stay if you have the time.
Unfortunately, I have to go back into a meeting, so I'm sorry. I wish I could attend, but I'll try to get some more details afterward, okay?
Yeah, very good.
Be well, and thank you.
We have Catherine Derone that's been waiting for us for quite some time. Is she with us?
Yes.
Yeah, there you are. Okay.
How are you?
So I think if no one needs to take a break, we'll move right on to Catherine and try to save that time for the rest of our witnesses. So good morning, Catherine, and welcome back to our meetings.
Great. Good morning, Senator, and good morning to all of you. Been on for part of the morning here today and was really encouraged by at least parts of the conversation that I heard, particularly Heather, your questions on how do we capitalize on all of the things that we in Vermont value our farmers do. And I think that that conversation and a lot of the others that were talked about here today, I can see that this group is really kind of starting to find a path here, and I think is going to make for some really healthy conversation. So I wanted to jump in, but I'll save that for when we can do an in-person meeting. So, thanks for having me. Maybe just a quick opening statement. I know you heard from me just a couple of weeks or months ago, but Catherine Durand with Agrimark. We market milk for 750 of our dairy farmers in New England and New York. They produce 3.2 billion pounds of milk per year. And thanks to over 1,000 employees in 4 processing plants, we have, 3 very healthy brands, the Cabot brand, the Macadam brand, and our whey protein concentrate. So about 75% of our milk is marketed through those 4 plants, and the remaining is sold to different customers within the Northeast. Vermont, of course, is our home state. We have our Cabot, we have our Middlebury plant. About 1 billion pounds of that total 3.2 billion goes into our Vermont facilities. And as I've shared with you before, the vast majority of that milk, depending on market situations, does come from Vermont. So I think because you have heard from me, I thought that today it might be best for me to just kind of run through the questions that were sent to me and just get those direct answers and then open it up for conversation.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, very good. So going through the 3 pages here, I think I can buzz through them pretty quickly, but how much milk do you purchase annually? That is 3.2 billion pounds of milk. As I just said, about 1 billion of that is going through our Vermont facilities. We purchase milk from our dairy co-op members. There are instances, I think we talked about it on our last call, where we will work with other cooperatives in the region and do, what we call swaps or commingled loads. And basically it's, it's a very direct transaction. And the reason we do that is primarily just so that we all as a dairy industry have hauling efficiencies. Okay, so prime example, if you have 2 small farms on one route, one is an Agrimark member, one's another co-op member, let's not, both have to pay for a milk truck to go out and grab that. So we do participate with some efficiency type of work there. Number 3, going to what price do we pay for the products that we purchase? So we pay for our milk all based on the federal order pricing. Okay, so that would be the blend price, and then that changes, of course, based on what our commodity prices are and utilization in the region. Number 4, are you a regulated pool plant? So our Vermont and New York plants are considered federally pool plants, and those all follow the federal order pricing. Our 4th plant is West Springfield and does still follow the federal order pricing, but is what we call a non-pool plant. And so with those plants, the prices that we're paying for the milk that goes into that are based on what those federal order class prices are. Do we ever pay a premium for the milk that we use? Yes, we do. So right here, right now, and today, where we will pay a premium for milk is on quality. So Agrimark has a quality program, and if a farmer can meet certain quality standards in their milk, they are subject to receive that quality program. It is very popular in our cooperative. In the past, I would say that we've seen situations, both within Agrimark and kind of just out in the marketplace in general, where there have been premiums for other types of things like volume as an example. That probably where we are here with so much milk seems like, way before my time that we ever paid a volume premium. But I say that to just in general say, if there is a need of the cooperative, and a value for something, we can then market and turn around and sell. So for example, if our plants were empty and we needed more farms, we might pay a volume premium. if we feel that quality cheese is really important for our brand, which of course we do, we would want to pay a quality premium for quality milk, right? So, so long as we can support and collect that value from the marketplace, then we would develop a premium for that. How much milk that you purchase is coming from Vermont producers? So about, if you think about our co-op in general, about 26, a little bit more, 28% of our milk is from Vermont members. And so that represents the vast majority of that 1 billion pounds of our total that goes through our Vermont facilities. We talked about this last time I was here, and you were questioning how much milk will flow from other states into Vermont. And that really, as I said, vast majority of the time, it's Vermont milk. But there are situations where something's going on in the marketplace, something's going on with a particular plant where those natural or those usual situations will change a bit. So I think last time we talked about the labor challenges that we were having, and I talked about milk that would normally flow into those plants from Vermont or from New Hampshire, as an example, having to flow out of the state because there wasn't a home for milk at that point in time. So that relationship does change here and there, but by a general rule of thumb, most of the milk going through our Vermont facilities is coming from Vermont, and sometimes a little bit of New Hampshire or New York. Finished products that we produce, about 280 million pounds is produced in Vermont. So that's cheeses, Greek yogurt, sour cream, cottage. And then if you go outside of the Vermont border and think about West Springfield, we would also have our butter, milk powders, and then whey proteins as well. I answered the plant capacity question with a volume 2.3 billion pounds going through our own plants. Let's see, plant output in Vermont, 280 million pounds of product. So trying not to repeat myself too much. Going down to number 11, how much by a percentage of your products are sold in Vermont and domestically? So if you think about our portfolio, food service in Vermont represents about 1% of our food service sales nationally. Retail sales in Vermont represent about 1% of our net sales nationally as well. So our cheese products, our cultured products, et cetera, are sold all on the Eastern Seaboard. Our cheese itself, not taking into account cultured, that actually is in every state in the United States. And then I think you also are aware that our whey protein concentrate products are sold internationally, and quite a bit of it. Whey permeate about 95% of what we made is sold internationally. And the whey protein concentrate, about 16% is sold internationally. So 13, kind of shifting gears here on what the value of the Vermont brand is, and thinking about what value adds. I thought that was the conversation we had this morning was really interesting. And Dan, maybe it was you who asked about sort of the intrinsic quality of Vermont, or maybe it was someone else. I hope I didn't get that wrong. But, talking to our cheese graders and our sales team, they would say that there truly is. And it's, milk in Vermont, milk in the Northeast in general, very much the analogy I was given was think about grape varieties, right? Same grape variety produced in California, France, or New York. Same variety is going to give you a very different taste of wine. Very similar with milk. So the forage is going into, farms and milks, and the soil quality, all of that does give milk in the Northeast, and therefore the cheese products that we make, a very distinct flavor and taste. And so when you go outside of Vermont, people want Vermont cheddar, right? And it's because of that sort of salty, acidic nuttiness, I think, is how we would describe it. You can tell I'm not a wine or cheese connoisseur. But there is indeed, an intrinsic value to the brand, and we certainly capitalize on it quite a bit. And I would say that, as we think about where we want to go moving forward, and what Vermont can really do for, the dairy industry in general, it's taking advantage of that Vermont brand, and that flavor and all of that. So 14, do you buy organic raw milk? So I will say that we market milk on behalf of a very small number of our own farmer members that supply milk to Organic Valley. We do not ourselves produce any organic products. A number of years ago, before my time when organic was just starting to launch, we did try it and it did not stick. We were probably a little bit too early to that game and ahead of ourselves. And lastly, how many pounds of cheese can you make from 100 pounds of milk? So the standard ratio is about 10 pounds of milk makes about 1 pound of cheese. And so we went all over the place there, but wanted to make sure I got your questions answered, and whatever else you want to hear, let me know. Senator Starr, your mic is muted if you were trying to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks. Probably be better if you didn't hear me anyways, but no. John Roberts has the first question.
Catherine, good to see you. Completely off the wall question.
Okay.
What would your opinion be if Vermont went all organic?
If Vermont went all organic, as in all of our farms went organic.
We made them go organic.
Well, here would be my gut reaction to that is, you know, you heard the last speaker talk about the trends in organic, right? We know some of the challenges in the organic marketplace. I'll just tell you from our own sales team, when we look at data for what is the next step for us, organic's one of the ones we always look at. And one of the interesting things that we've been seeing in the last several years is that organic is still increasing in demand from consumers. But we tend to see that the growth of organic takes off in other places outside of the Northeast a little bit more than it does here. So it tends to be more pocketed. Colorado, California, you're seeing tremendous amount of organic growth right there. In the Northeast, it's definitely still increasing, but not at that same rate. And so when we look at, is organic something that we would want to go in, we need to take that into consideration. And in the Northeast, we tend to see that there's trends such as natural or grass-fed or other things that are taking off, and we're seeing higher growth rates than we are with organic. Okay, I say all of that to say that when Cabot's looking to make an investment, we right now have not decided that organic is the way to go based on the trends that we're seeing. So for us, if all of the Vermont farmers were required to be organic, I'm not sure that we could capture that value from the marketplace. It would be a hard decision for us to make. And so that would require our brand, our processing, you know, all of these different things would have to change to get us to that. So I wouldn't say that's our official stance on your question, John, but those would be the kind of thought processes that we would be going through.
Oh, I really appreciate that. And I'm, you know, it is something that we get, every dairy farmer hears at some point, why don't you go organic? And yep, I appreciated the kind of uncertainty in your answer and the way you said it. It is something that I am extremely concerned about is when we get pressured to make that move, that there isn't the marketplace to support that. So I wanted that question out in the public because it is something we are going on this task force. We are certainly getting thrown at us. And I think the problem with this whole question is it is far, far, far more complex than just one simple answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, John. John O'Brien, I believe, has a question.
Thanks, Bobby. Catherine, I just hoping you could speak to just how you buy your milk. And I don't understand the federal pricing order maybe as much as everybody else here. But it seems that there's a certain amount of volatility, and it seems to be much easier to go low and rather than high. And since you're in a business where your margins improve if you can buy cheaper milk, so how does that work? And then the other part of it is if we all sort of know what price per 100 dairy farmers need to make to really stay in business, and for years now they've been below that, how does Agrimark Cabot sort of deal with that? Like, okay, they need 20 pounds, they need 20, 100 to survive, but it's been 18 or 15 or even 12. We know what outcome that's going to have ultimately.
Yeah, so let me give you, the dairy pricing 101 really takes an hour, but we'll give it to you in about 1 minute, right? So the pricing system, the federal order pricing that we have here in the US that most of us abide to, that Agrimark abides to, it is based on really just an intrinsic challenge of what is raw milk worth. And no one buys raw milk, right? So we have this disconnect between the supplier and the consumer, right? So to try to fill that gap, what the federal order pricing tries to do is say, okay, well, consumers don't buy raw milk. What do they buy? Let's look at what those supply and demand dynamics are, and let's use those market prices to back into what the value of raw milk is and what we should pay our farmers. So we have 4 basic commodity prices: cheese, whey, butter, and non-fat, that we have a massive marketplace for pricing information for. And those 4 products are, through a series of not complicated, but frankly tedious to look through equations, relates those commodity prices and what components of milk are in those commodity prices back to raw milk, essentially. And so it is tedious and it is hard to understand, but that's the best situation that we could all come forward to try to connect the lack of consumer to the raw milk product, right? And so it makes, that's how we pay our prices, pay our farmers. We look at what the federal order prices are. They're based on the marketplace. That's what we are going to pay our farmers for. That's what, our prices of product are based on when we sell them as well. So it's all interconnected. So that's kind of the 101 in a nutshell in terms of your first question. Your second question in, how do we just support our farmers when there are low milk prices? I mean, it kind of gets down to your first one in that, the marketplace tells us what that product is for, right? Those 4 commodity prices that we track are going to dictate what the farm price of milk is going to be. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, and I might have lost you here. Or maybe okay, there you are. Sometimes, sorry, I lost my train of thought. When the prices are low and the margins are rough, we can't go and command more out of the products we sell because they're also related to the marketplace. And so it becomes very challenging. And, particularly for a co-op in this situation, as you mentioned, it is this tug of war between needing to sell our product and get that profit so we can sell it back or share it back with our members, invest it in our brand and whatnot, but also trying to support our members as much as possible. And on that, we really know that prices are national. And to address those, we really need to take a national look at it. So Agrimark has, we are always very involved in the policy discussions taking place in Washington, developing safety net programs that work for farmers on a national scale. We have also been very involved in developing safety net programs on a state level in states that we operate in. And really, regardless of whether it's state or national, those safety nets are really designed to help out the margin situation on farmers. So we become active in conversations like that. We've also just have a great history of being active and kind of going a little bit rogue and trying to make some changes. So, you know, I know many of you were either at or aware of the convention we held a couple of years ago in Albany to really address, you know, low milk prices and what we can do on a national basis to change things. So we are really involved in trying to drive changes to that. But it's a severe challenge, and it becomes more challenging when you think about just the regional differences and the regional hardships that we face here in the Northeast as compared to other areas where, you know, farming's a lot easier when you have good soil, you know, no rocks. So I hope that answered your question.
Well, thank you there, Dan.
Catherine, a couple just quick questions. The output, thank you for that. Capacity of the raw milk capacity of the 2 Cabot plants? So Ralph gave us some sense of what, you know, where there was room to grow, kind of that's the question. You're 1 billion raw milk equivalent output or use. So is there additional capacity for growth?
In Vermont?
Yeah.
At this point in time, no. So all of our plants really throughout our system are full at this point in time.
Yeah, I guess that's the base excess issue. Yeah. Okay.
And that's the base excess issue. And, you know, it's not just an Agrimark issue, right? I mean, we're all dealing with it, especially when we've had the demand disruptions of the last year. So yes, at this point in time, we are capped at our capacity. And one thought I think deserves some discussion maybe in the task force is to think about, you know, going back to one of the things that kind of sparked my mind was when you guys were talking this morning about the brand, right? And what does Vermont bring as a value? And I hope I made the point that our Vermont brand is extremely important for us because people like the taste, they like the feeling of when they, you know, consume Vermont. So long as our production capacity in Vermont is limited, I think our ability to capitalize on that intrinsic value that we have is also limited. So I'm wondering, I don't know what's being discussed within, you know, your committee or the state, but what kind of support would be given to, you know, thinking about ideas to generate more processing capacity in the state to, you know, allow more milk to flow throughout the system, farmers to have a little bit more flexibility in how they could grow or whatnot, you know, increase jobs, all of that. I just throw that out there.
Translation, if the Cabot plants had greater capacity, you think you could sell more Cabot cheese around? Okay. So, absolutely. And then just from a configuration of Agrimark at this point, the Vermont milk goes into the Cabot plants. New York milk is more going into macadam and into the powder plant, but there isn't very much Vermont milk anymore going into the powder plant. And that's also because you don't need to balance as much making cheese as opposed to fluid. So is that a fair statement?
So I would say that under normal situations, all of the very much of the Vermont milk is going to stay within the system. In the last couple of weeks that we, you know, as we've already talked about with some of the labor challenges, when we see that the production capacity at Cabot, as an example, is not there, then milk does start to flow into West Springfield or elsewhere.
But that's not product balancing like with the fluid market. That's the market conditions, difficult market. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Catherine, we've got to move on here in a minute, but you know, one thing I've thought about often is you know, the federal milk market order, it's always looked at as the price that farmers get paid. The unemployment insurance program is the same thing. There's a minimum that we pay people for, and we used to pay people that minimum wage amount all over everywhere. In the last few years, companies have paid way above the minimum wage to start employees, giving them bonuses for signing on. Why do we have to always pay farmers the federal pricing, follow the federal pricing system? Why couldn't that be increased by 10% by the co-ops throughout the country? And then everybody would pay the federal price plus 10% or a certain amount. Why couldn't something like that happen in the United States?
So the answer is that it could happen. There is nothing in the federal order pricing that says you have to pay the minimum and you can't go above, right? That just sets a floor and you can really do whatever you want. So I'll give you the example of our quality premiums, right? I mean, that's where we're taking the federal minimum price, but saying we are going to pay you more because we value that. But here's the important distinction, I think, is that we value that because we can get the value on the other side where we sell that product in the marketplace. So I think the real challenge that we're dealing with here is, you know, and it's a bigger philosophical issue, but what are consumers willing to pay? And, you know, if in brands or, you know, if we're trying to increase that price to get more money back to the farmers, you know, consumers accept that or they don't accept that. So we're very open to finding something that is valuable of that milk or of that brand or something, and getting a higher price back to farmers. But the real challenge, I think, for everyone is to find what do the consumers really value? I mean, organic's an example of it. Grass-fed could be an example of it. Agrimark's a B Corp, that could be an example of it, but it has to translate into actual dollars that can be passed along.
Well, I've noticed in the last 6 months, the price of gas has gone from what, $2.10, $2.20 to $3.10 and $3.20. And, you know, people, you still see them in lines at the gas station buying their gas, and I don't think there's any shortage of gas. I think we're still got a glut of it, but anyways, are there other questions for Catherine? Because we've still got 2 more people to testify. Michael?
Thanks, Bob. Just one quick question for Catherine. I know the last time, you know, we talked about labor issues and, you know, the Cabot plant was shut down on Saturdays and Sundays. Has that gotten any better because we've changed the, made sure that people had to go out and job search?
It definitely has improved. So I think the last time we spoke, I had shared that we were operating at 5 days a week.
Right.
We're now up to about 6 days a week. So that is a sigh of relief, but still to be down one day a week is extremely challenging. And I think I probably also shared that we had, you know, executives running the line just to make sure that we get those products. So, you know, that dynamic is definitely still there, though it has been alleviated some. You know, that I think is another great topic worth exploring. And, you know, how do we create, and we're thinking about it amongst ourselves, you know, how do we create incentives and opportunities to, you know, we have jobs, right? Let's put people in them. What can we do? You know, is there an opportunity for the state to help out? And, you know, addressing some of those challenges. So I see this as, you know, given the labor market that we're in right now, unfortunately, probably more of a longer term challenge, but certainly some improvements recently. And, you know, thank God for all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Catherine, for your time this morning. And, you know, you're welcome to stay on. We've got a couple more witnesses and, you know, we're going to be meeting many times in the future and may call on you again. So thanks again.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, John, you've been waiting a long time. Sorry that we ran over your time so much, but welcome. We have John Rooney on board with us next from Monument Farms down in central Vermont in a small milk processor. So welcome, John, and tell us a little bit about Monument Farms.
Thanks, Senator Starr. So we're a wee bit different than many processors in the state in that we are a producer handler. So we fall outside of, we still have to report to the market administrator every month, but we fall outside of the pricing requirements set by the market administrator. In that we milk around 530 cows roughly, and we process all our own milk. There are no payments to producers in that we operate from one checkbook. So all of our farm bills are paid regardless of whether the market price is $25 a hundred or $13 a hundredweight. So I guess that's, in a sense, that's where our premium comes in, because typically we can't produce milk as cheaply as the market prices it traditionally. I do have answers to all the questions you sent out. So milk or milk products that we purchase annually, again, we don't actually purchase them, but we're in the 16 to 17 million pounds a year range. We do purchase cream, some outside cream from St. Albans due to all the changes in consumer trends, and the fluid milk has been trending more toward whole milk and less skim and low fat milks. So that's created a huge difference in the amount of cream we can generate. So we have to replace a lot of that with cream, and we purchase from St. Albans Co-op. And we have to drive up there and fill a tote and drive back. And that cream is used to make our half and half, so that our really good cream is available for heavy cream sales. We
want to tell St. Albans that, John.
Excuse me?
We want to tell St. Albans that their cream is not the really good cream.
I have there, but I mean that's restaurants and chocolatiers in the state buy our cream for a reason, and so in order to keep them happy, we use outside cream for half and half usually. We do purchase cream from St. Albans Co-op. We're not allowed to purchase milk directly from farms. We have to go through a co-op in order to satisfy the market administrator that we're not dealing under the table or anything. So any outside products that we do purchase, whether it's milk or cream, has to come through a regulated supplier. Price that we pay is what it costs to produce. And like I said, typically it tends to cost us a bit more to produce the milk than many farms are getting a lot of the time. We're in a real good competitive situation when milk prices are high, because we can produce it for less than farms are getting. But typically it's the reverse case, in which case all of our competitors can buy milk, raw product, cheaper than we can produce it. So it's not a huge benefit price wise. However, we price the milk, all of our products, based on what it costs us to produce them. So our prices tend to remain much more consistent. And I think it's been a year and a half since our last price change, which is a bit silly, but it's a fairly involved deal to change our prices the way we're set up. So it tends to be long times in between price changes. We are regulated by the federal milk marketing order, but we aren't regulated as far as pricing goes. We're limited in how much outside product we can bring in to sell. So if we underproduce and need to buy more than 150,000 pounds a month of outside milk, which isn't really very much, then we become a pooled plant and are subject to all the same prices as any fluid milk plant. We don't pay premiums, like I said, unless you keep a really loose definition of premium. We do pay premiums when we buy outside product, typically a fairly healthy margin over class 1 when we have to bring in outside milk. And pretty much the only time that happens, a couple of years ago, we had that really severe heat wave and our production just crashed, as did most of Vermont. And we were forced to bring in some outside milk. We finished products that we produce, all the typical fluid milk products from skim through whole milk and half and half heavy cream, chocolate milk and low fat chocolate milk. And that's about it. We don't make any manufactured products at all. I can't figure out how to turn the phone ringer off. Sorry. Our plant capacity right now, we're probably sitting at 80 to 90% capacity with what we have, and we're actually at a real crossroads right now and trying to decide whether we feel real optimistic about being able to sell fluid milk as our competitors drop off one by one. It becomes easier and easier to sell fluid milk, although we do have to travel further and further to do it. But our farm is nearing max capacity right now. We have a anaerobic digester, which has a limited capacity. So it'll be really tricky to increase our fluid milk production, and our processing plant, like I said, we're probably at 80 to 85% capacity right now, and fairly inefficient as far as automation goes. We rely on a lot of manual labor. So we are at a crossroads of having to decide whether to invest heavily in a new processing plant and additional farm cow housing and milking facility as well. So, and my generation, the majority owners of the business, we're hard to believe, but we're beginning to age out a bit. So, you know, we also have to take the next generation into account in any decisions we make. We don't sell any products knowingly outside of the state. The value that Vermont brand adds to our product, we like to feel like we typify a Vermont product. To us, we are what Vermont means. And we market our products accordingly. We've done a lot of, in the past 3 or 4 years, 3 years anyway. We've done a lot of marketing, some video work, and a great deal more emphasis on advertising and promoting the positive aspects of our business. But we don't typically just promote ourselves using the Vermont name, because everything we sell is in Vermont. We aren't trying to sell to people out of the state. We don't buy or sell organic. That's not true. We do sell a couple organic items, but not really intentionally. It's kind of by accident. Yeah. So that in a nutshell, that's us.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing okay. You just need to grow more to do more. Get big's better, right, John?
Well, not necessarily, The headaches do seem to grow right along with it, but
yeah,
it is hard to pass up the opportunity, although we've been doing it forever, passing up the opportunity to deliver to this customer or that customer. And, we've because we're, our farm has to grow right along with our sales. We can't just go out. We literally could double our sales overnight, if we had the milk and the ability to package it. But so we have to be very careful all the way along.
Yeah. No, you guys have done well. We felt real bad to lose Thomas, which down below you, that was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, it is.
It's really too bad.
And we were flooded with requests, by their customers, and able to take on only a small percentage of what they were selling, just due to lack of product.
Yeah, I know. Up north here, people like to buy locally produced milk. You'll go in and we have a local, sort of local bottler in Barry, and you'll see their milk pretty well gone and their competition's milk sitting on the shelf. And then we know, of course, it comes out of the same plant, but it's amazing to see that. So John O'Brien has a question for you, John.
Yep.
Just a quick one, John. Since you're in a unique position, unlike the other witnesses today, what's a ballpark on when you said you pay what it costs to make that milk? So do you have a sense of what per 100 your sort of break even point is?
Well, it does depend a lot, and it does vary a lot depending on primarily on energy prices and feed prices. I mean, that impacts immediately and directly, but we're typically in the around $20 a hundredweight.
Yeah, that's just really helpful to know.
Yeah, that's just us. There are much more efficient producers out there.
Well,
and you're an MFO?
Yes, we are, although we're now pushing the upper border of it. But technically we are still,
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions for John?
Yep. Chairman
John.
Starry, please. I will just say that Monument Farms are members of my coalition, so for clarity. John, good to see you. I was very taken by your comment that you're very limited in being able to buy milk from other farms because of federal, becoming a pool plant. That's a federal requirement, I assume, not a state requirement.
Correct. Right. And it varies from order to order.
Huh.
No, that number may not vary actually,
No.
but the end result of a producer handler becoming a pool handler or pooled plant, I think those can vary from order to order, depending on the whims of the market administrator.
Right. Is that number, that 150,000 gallons, which is
Pounds.
basic pounds, sorry. Yes, pounds, which is basically 2 tractor trailer loads. Is that based on a percentage of your overall production, or is that just a number that they picked?
At one time it was a percentage, but then about 10 years ago, there was a big attempt made by IDFA and the National Milk Producer Federation as well, to severely curtail producer handlers. In that there were some huge producer handlers who were avoiding, the pool payments and such, because and these were like 20, 30, 40,000 cow producers, immense amounts of milk. So at that time, the IDFA and National Milk Producers Federation were able to at least limit the size of a producer handler. So currently, there's a cap on 3 million pounds a month or less can still qualify as a producer handler. And currently, we're just a little over a third of that size.
Would it benefit you if you were able to, be able to buy more milk without making that jump?
Yes and no. Any outside milk we buy is typically priced very highly due to its spot nature, as opposed to, a regularly occurring purchase.
Yeah.
I don't know how we would make that work. Even if more milk were available, we'd much prefer to know where our milk's coming from and what's going into it.
In the same quality, I would presume.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions for Jean? If not, hey, John, we really appreciate you taking time away from your dairy and all your other work to spend with us. And, thanks a lot for being so free with it.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thank you, John.
Anytime, and good luck with your hard work here.
Well, keep plugging away. We know it's going to be different when we get to the end. So thanks.
Hopefully not hugely different.
Well, it won't affect you if you produce.
It might. It depends what you decide. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks again. And we'll move on to Mateo Keeler. Mateo still with us?
Sure am.
Well, you've been waiting since 9:15.
I've been a little catching up in the background here.
Well, good. Well, welcome, Mateo, and we really appreciate you sticking around, hanging in there with us. So again, did you get a copy of our questions or did you have?
I sure did.
your
Yeah, I
own
don't have a
pre-
presentation.
No?
But I thought I'd start by just giving you a little update on what's happening in our business.
Sure.
We took the opportunity, COVID really affected us early, and we lost about 40% of our sales overnight as social distancing went into effect, and we ended up dispersing our herd of cows at Jasper Hill. They went to 3 farms, one of which we own, Andersonville Farm in West Glover, and 2 neighbors, Bar Hill Farm and Tom and Lori Hill, who neighbor us on the bottom of our farm. They each milk about 50 cows. We're taking the opportunity, to invest in our barn, scale up a little bit, and we're in the final stretch of a 10,000 square foot addition to our cheese plant at Jasper Hill. So we'll be going from 40 stalls to 120 stalls. And that project is slated to start either this fall or next spring, depending on what happens with like material pricing, which is just totally out of hand right now. But we're basically doubling down. We bought reconditioned some French cheese making equipment that's going to be commissioned week after next, and it's going to increase our capacity substantially. Still a rounding error in the big picture, but our goal is to support 10 farms within a 15-mile radius of where we are with radically different pay scale than what the commodity market is doing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So we currently purchase about 4 million pounds of milk. We produce about 4 million pounds of milk. So we're right in that like kind of 50-50 range. And we purchase milk from 5 producers currently, including Goat Dairy in Hardwick that we're partnered in with Ryan and Annie Andrus. They're milking 450 goats, heading to 700 here in the next year and a half. We pay between $25 and $38 a hundredweight for that milk. The goat milk is, I think the market price is somewhere in the 52 to 58 range, and we base all of our decisions here on pay price based on cost of production. We work with the Center for an Ag Economy and their staff, who's been doing business planning for these farms to establish what their cost of production is. And generally, the farms that we're working on, cost of production ranges from $19 to $27. We're interested in paying for value-added milk. So depending on the practices on the farm, if it's hay-fed, non-GMO milk that is of suitable quality for the production of raw milk cheese, we can pay well over $30 a hundredweight for that milk. It's more expensive to produce, and it's inherently more valuable to us. But for milk that's going into our pasteurized products, we're essentially paying $25 to $27 a hundredweight, and we buy that milk from the co-ops Agrimark is fundamental to the success of our model. It allows us to access great milk from great producers, but not have to take 100% of their milk. And our business is seasonal. We do probably 40% of our sales in the tail end of the third quarter and the fourth quarter. So that presents some challenges for us. We basically purchase the milk from Agrimark and pay the producers we're working with a premium on the side based on the difference between what their blended price and their milk check is, and $25 to $27 a hundredweight, unless they're making hay-fed raw milk, non-GMO raw milk, in which case we're up closer to 40. So just to review, we buy the milk from Agrimark. Agrimark pays the farmer, and then we actually operate 2 milk trucks. We collect the milk directly from the farm and pay the producer a premium on the side based on microbiological quality. So that's the kicker for us, is we've set some aggressive microbiological standards, and farmers we're working with do a pretty great job of making sure their equipment is clean and their protocols can deliver that quality to us. And in exchange, they get a lot more money for their milk. Let's see. 100% of the milk that we purchase is from Vermont. We produce cheese, and at Bridgman, about 80% of the goat milk goes into bottles. We purchase the Oak Knoll brand and the herd of goats and equipment down from Oak Knoll Dairy and Windsor in 2018, and built a bottling plant in Hardwick that has a huge amount of capacity. We're developing a drinkable yogurt at this point, and someday we may end up bottling some cow's milk there. But I think we're bottling about 700,000 pounds of milk a year. Most of that milk is going to established markets and Whole Foods up and down the Eastern Seaboard. Established market is amazing to start a business and have cash flow right out the gate. Bottling milk is we see that as a real opportunity moving forward. And cheese, right? So we make about 15 different varieties of cheese. We also ripen cheese for other Vermont producers, including Cabot. Our plant capacity, well, we operate 2 cheese plants, one at the Vermont Food Venture Center in Hardwick and one here at Jasper Hill Farm in Greensboro. Combined, we have about 30 million pounds of capacity this point, which is, would produce about 3.5 million pounds of cheese. We also, at our bottling plant in Hardwick, have the capacity to grow, from about 700,000 pounds to around 3 million pounds of bottled milk there. We estimate that about 5% of our production is actually sold in Vermont. It's embarrassing to say, but we learned this early, that the market for artisan cheese, the Vermont could not support a 140 cow dairy, like, you know, and we consider ourselves an exporter. We're exporting primarily to the United States, but we do ship cheese to Australia, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, and believe it or not, we sell some cheese to France. It's like, you know, selling snowballs to the Eskimos. So that's about 3 or 4% of our production is being exported outside the United States. The Vermont brand, I think, is like, it's important. It's not the thing that tips a customer over into our court. We live or die based on the quality of our products, and we compete on quality, not on price. I do believe that what Cheryl was talking about in the Ben and Jerry's presentation, that Vermont has the opportunity to lead from the front and to really bolster, you know, and lead the dairy industry. I think that, you know, when I look out at the dairy industry nationally, it's been one huge race to the bottom. There are some really troubling trends from our perspective around dairy in Vermont, and the scaling of dairy that's been driven by like market conditions and policy behind that market. Ultimately, you know, the water quality issues and the, you know, the positive feedback loops that are in place that are driving scale in Vermont, I think have they present some very big political and marketing challenges for dairy. We understand that agriculture has been part of the problem over you know, the past, and rather needs to be an important part of the solution to climate change. And Vermont is uniquely positioned to lead there. And we personally need that kind of support, because we're out there on the front lines interfacing with a market that is becoming more increasingly hostile towards dairy products. We're feeling that quite directly. Let's see. I have no idea how to answer 13B, which is what's the value per pound of cheese that the Vermont brand brings. And we do not buy any organic milk, although we do ripen cheese for 2 Vermont organic farmstead cheese producers. So we're organic certified. All our production is non-GMO, and that has been kind of a middle ground that we found that we can recover value in the marketplace. The reality is that in the high-end specialty cheese, you can't recover an organic. It's like if you look at most organic cheese is like commodity, like vacuum packed, kind of very bottom of the market in terms of quality. We're able to extract sometimes, you know, 2 or 3 times the value that like, Organic Valley's like, you know, Jack cheese at the co-op might bring. And that so our customers don't necessarily care about organic. they trust that our practices are going to be sustainable, and that the animal health and our ethic is going to come through in the and is represented by the quality of the cheese, right? And there's like a link there. It's not explicit. So we don't necessarily, like, organic is a terrible measure of quality, right? You can have nasty mastitic pathogen infested organic milk that's not fit for cheese making. We're operating in a kind of totally different realm in terms of quality. And that's basically what we communicate to our customers. So I guess I'll leave it at that if there are any questions.
Well, what about committee members? Anyone have a question from the crew? Jackie?
From the peanut gallery.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Matteo. This is fascinating. So I have two questions, one of which has come up with several of our other witnesses today, and that is the issue of labor throughout your system. And also, have you worked with a farm that had to leave being within your program because of any reason whatsoever? Either they couldn't make it on the price of milk that they were getting paid or anything to that effect? Thanks.
So labor is a challenge. You know, we have 120 employees now. And to some extent, there's always a little churn and burn. But we've been able to attract people from across the country to come work here. You know, about half of the people that work at Jasper Hill are from our local community, and half are coming from outside. One of the biggest challenges we face is like housing here. I'll just put it, we've had over 20 families with children that have moved here to work for us from out of state, and none of them live in Greensboro. And our school is about to close. You know what I mean? That's like a whole other thing. Housing is just like a massive problem in terms of attracting people to come work here. There's nowhere to live in this area. And we have, so the Bridgman Hill Farm, we ended up purchasing that from the family. We were purchasing their milk prior to a bankruptcy, so a divorce and a bankruptcy, and we ended up purchasing the farm from them. So I guess that counts as somebody not making it. There's some extenuating circumstances there and a huge amount of debt and some other personal problems there.
Well, I thought the farm right behind us in Peacham, the Kemptons, were they working with you at one time?
They
And
were,
they've gone out.
yeah, so that was, we weren't purchasing milk from them. We were purchasing that milk, Agrimark was using their milk to make Cabot cloth bound cheddar. So we weren't necessarily involved in that transaction because that milk wasn't coming to our plant. It was going into cheese that was being produced at Cabot Creamery in Cabot. So that's like it's a totally different arrangement.
Okay, thanks.
So I think we have John Roberts has a question, and then John O'Brien.
Thanks, Matteo. It's always totally fascinating hearing about what you and your brother do up there. I'm curious, and it's because I don't understand milk purchasing. John Rooney mentioned about how he cannot purchase more than 2 tractor trailer loads of milk a month, and yet you talk about you're buying 4 million pounds of milk, I think. What's the difference that you don't have to comply with the federal milk marketing rules that Monument Farms has to comply with?
We're an Agrimark customer.
Okay, so that's just it. Okay, thank you. And you want to speculate at all on where you see Jasper Hill going in 20 years?
Well, I think there are some natural limits to growth. We're quite community oriented. We're interested in developing a market like ecosystem. The way we think about our business is that what we're doing is we're building a pipeline to markets where there's disposable income, and we're sucking cash out of those markets by basically putting high value products into that pipeline. So, high value products go in and cash comes out, and we redistribute it in a way that commodity markets don't. The commodity market system is failed. There's just from my perspective, what's actually happening is a policy that's been in place for 50 years, which essentially extracts wealth and transfers equity from rural communities to urban and suburban communities through a pricing mechanism. That's what's happened. It used to be bucolic when you'd see these older, beautiful, historic barns. Now they're all falling down in the Northeast Kingdom. It's not bucolic anymore. It's completely depreciated. There isn't the kind of investment or the viability in a small family farm up here. If you're not milking 1,000 cows and growing 500 acres of corn, you can't compete. And all of this is in pursuit of cheap milk for cheap food for who? But, honestly, how do you get Trump elected? This is exactly how you do it. You extract equity and transfer it out of rural America for 50 years, and you end up in the situation that we're in. We're essentially, we've just drawn a circle 15 miles from where we are, and we're going to try and invest as much money as possible by extracting it and reversing the flows of capital by creating higher value products in order to create a livable community. And that's what we see the power of cheese being. It's not just, cheese is just a vehicle. But we need 5 or 10 Jasper Hills in Vermont. That's, that would be 50, 60, farms. 10% of the farms could be getting plugged into this sort of thing. But, you heard from Agrimark, if they had more processing capacity, they could make more cheese and market more milk. We just spent, $4 million on a plant, and it's a real stretch for us. And we got a $75,000 working lands grant to pay for some energy recovery equipment we're going to install. But what we're competing against is tax policy in countries like France, where there's a 70% tax credit if you invest in dairy and food production or energy efficiency. And we're actually not competing with Vermont producers. We're competing with Lactalis. Okay, Lactalis is a competitor, and Bongran, and these Emmy, these multi-billion-dollar companies that are global in nature, that are exporting high quality natural rinded cheeses into the US, and would love to buy us, by the way. That's who we're competing with. we're not competing against other Vermont cheesemakers. We're going to market together, and in most cases, we're competing against some real giants that have no interest in really seeing the price of milk go up. You know what I mean? They're part of it, the problem, I'd say.
Wow. Yep, I think that very sobering series of remarks you said you made there, and I appreciate that. A lot to think about. Thank you.
I think I can
Bobby,
read
you're
your
muted.
lips, Bobby.
Yeah.
Mateo, you just touched on this, but I remember the last time you were in the State House and we saw you, you just come back from a trip to France and maybe Switzerland, looking at those cheese region, where the farms are relatively small and relatively stable. And so maybe we have to have you back for a discussion on that. But just from your position, looking at us as policymakers, how do you see Vermont? Should it transition to that sort of model, or a New Zealand model or a Canadian model? Where would you go if you were in our seats?
I think one of the problems we are facing is I think this is like maybe a national problem, is like the appetite for actually investing in infrastructure and R&D, and like the role of the state in the economy is slid so far away from the policies that created like the prosperity that was at the base of the American economic experience. It's going to take, if you want the dairy industry in Vermont to remain a vital part of the rural economy here, it's going to require like investment, and nobody wants to really like invest in, first of all, it's like totally investing, making investment dollars, whether it's like through tax credit system or actual like injection of funds into infrastructure and private businesses, is like anathema. Right across the border in Quebec, if you want to build a cheese plant, about 60% of the cost of the infrastructure would be paid for by the government. And this is like money that's coming from settlements with like EU quota. Canadians released released a bunch of quota for European cheeses. And one of the side effects of that was that, and this can be anywhere in Canada, almost 60% of a new project right now would be grant funded, right? They're making huge amounts of resources available to like processors in their rural economy. We don't do that, right? So, you can fiddle around the edges, but we have this like federal policy that controls milk pricing that you don't have any control over. And unless, the state of Vermont is going to get serious about investing in like infrastructure to support the creation of more value, then we're going to be stuck with this low-cost producer model, which is going to drive scale, and you're never going to solve the water quality problem. You're just never going to do it, because the carrying capacity of the land right now has been like surpassed by the scale of the farms that are on it, right? That's just, nobody wants to hear that. But that's the truth. growing corn on hillsides in like the Northeast Kingdom makes absolutely like no sense, except that's what the market is demanding of farmers, right? That's what, if you don't do that, then you can't survive. And we're in the business of trying to keep the farms in our community going. But in order to do that, there's a pay price. I think pay price right now, blended price is like $16 or something like that. And, how can you survive for 5 years operating a business, selling a product under your cost of production?
Yeah. And you pay, did you say you pay your people $28 to $35?
25 to 38, yeah.
And you must be, you're surviving by paying that much. And
well, we're making these cheeses that we can sell for $100 to $120 a hundredweight.
yeah, well, Cabot doesn't do too bad, do they, on 100? If you get 10 pounds of cheese out of or 11 out of 100 pounds of milk, 10 pounds of cheese is worth quite a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Other questions for Mateo? I don't see any hands. If there are no other questions, thanks a lot for hanging in there with us all morning long, Mateo. And as I've told the others, we're going to be having 7 or so more meetings, and we may have to call on you again when we get to figuring out where the heck we're going to go and how we want to get there.
Happy to contribute, and if you're in the neighborhood, swing by. I'd love to show you around.
Yeah, I'd be glad to stop in. I guess that's it for our witnesses. Do the members have any other questions of any of us? If not, we need to, the next meeting we have, we're going to have, Dan and I have talked about having some producers, dairy ag producers in, and some farmers, and I think Jackie and John Roberts have sent comments, but I think we've had the agency in, we've had processors in, and we've had the manufacturers in, so I think it'd be time to get some farmers in, and I hope knowledgeable farmers that can talk about the cost of production, how they've been eating away at their equity, if they have been, or if they've been making a profit with their $17, $18, $16 milk. Is that sort of where the committee would like to go in the future, as the next meeting, get some farmers in and hear their side of the story?
I think that's a good idea. And I think John and I have also had some offline discussions about having the farmers also talk about the risk management programs that they've been involved in, whether it's through their co-op or, because I know DFA has a pretty robust program, and also through FSA or any of the crop insurance programs, because I think that's one thing that I'm interested in, is how else besides the price can we affect the cost of production, and I think the risk management piece is a good one. So if we could have those, maybe the farmers address those as part of the questions, and also eventually maybe having the farm viability folks from BHCB in to talk about their side of it, because I know that the legislature put a lot of money into put extra funds during the 2020 crisis into working with farms to do business plans, and also to file those applications for assistance. And I'd like a little background on how that worked out, and if that's something we need to look at putting money into. So thanks.
Yep. Are there any other suggestions?
Just following up on what Jackie just said. Yeah, I did see a presentation about 2 or 3 months ago by Farm Credit on risk management, and maybe somebody from Farm Credit. I could go back and look and find out who did that webinar. It was from out of New Hampshire or Connecticut Farm Credit office, I forget, but the person gave a very good presentation of how the risk management programs work and how farmers can benefit from them.
Yeah, I saw that one too. It was a really good presentation. I think I've got the name down somewhere, but yeah.
Great. Thanks, Bobby.
Any other discussion on any in particular people you want us to kind of look at and find to come in? John?
Bobby, I was just thinking about what I think Mike O'Grady sent out some of those per Senator Brock's inquiry, whether there had been other task force who had looked into this. And I thought the main one was interesting in that was about 2004. It would be interesting to have a follow-up. Like, I thought, the committee did just sort of what we're doing. They had a lot of good suggestions and a lot of directives. And I just wondered how that went in Maine, if they just had, more or less the same decline we've had, even with all those good ideas, or whether they stabilized. I suspect it's still a downward spiral. And so how do we avoid coming up with all this good advice and yet not stop the downward spiral?
Well, I thought I read in the Maine report that they've had good results. They lost very few small farms, which we've lost a lot of ours, the small ones. We haven't, that's where our losses have been, is the small farms. We still got 31, 33 big ones. It's the middle and the small guys that we've lost, and that tiered pricing system that they set up in Maine has really stopped the bleeding up there on their smaller producers. Yeah, I read that extensively, and they've actually done pretty darn good maintaining their numbers.
But one of the things I asked Michael to do was to find out what the cost has been to the state, because I believe that, Danny, are you waving at us for the flyer? I believe that there hasn't, from what I have heard and understand, I believe that the general fund has had to donate or legislate or give more and more money to keep that fund going. And Michael's trying to find out from folks up there what the cost has been to the state itself out of the general fund, because we've had that discussion before in years past, and at that time we had 2,000 farms and the cost was quite prohibitive. I don't know what the state is putting into that fund, if it is, but I think Michael's trying to find out right now.
Yeah, I thought it was roughly 5 million a year or something in that neighborhood out of the general fund. We spend that 3-4 times over for current use and a host of other things. So anyways, Dan and I and Michael, will work out. See, I want to get the farmers in next. And then when we start trying to put pieces together, we'll bring in people from the other areas that have already done something. So, but to mix them all up, it will be, I think, I don't want to get the main people in when we get the farmers in, because they're totally different subject areas. And that's my opinion. Dan, where are you on that? You're muted, so you sound really good.
Like you said, you probably don't want to hear from me, so I agree with you, Bobby. I think we fill out the Vermont picture. Maine is hanging out there as an example. There has been less exiting of farm operations. Their milk production went up for a while and then stabilized. So it is an example of success, John. But Jackie, the money doesn't come directly out of the general fund. There's a handler fee assessed on the milk sales in the state. So they have a revenue stream that we don't have, because they've got more of a balance between the production and the consumption that we have. So that the assessment on the handlers goes into the general fund, and then it's actually available to be spent as a general fund expenditure, not limited to dairy. It does get spent on dairy, but it's not a dedicated fund. That's why it's in the general fund. But there is.
Well, I know that I thought that it hadn't. I thought that the fee hadn't kept up with the outlay. That's why I just wanted to make sure.
You're looking for,
Yeah. So that was the piece that I was looking for. Whether the tax on the handlers was actually keeping up with the amount that they were paying to the farmers. That was the little glitch.
Yeah, there is that actual can be, but they do set it. They do keep a running track of that. But certainly when milk prices crash, but it flips, right? So when milk prices go up, then it's counter-cyclical. So, but in time, I agree with Bobby that we should hear from them, and I think we should look around the country too. There are other states with different programs that have been tried over time, and we should scout around a little bit more.
I think Michael O'Grady has looked into that to some extent, and talked with the ag committees when we chatted about this. But did you have anything to add to that discussion, Michael?
No, not really. I mean, as I've discussed with the ag committees, there are other states besides Maine that have a fee, a handling fee, and they put the money to various uses. Sometimes it's used as basically an insurance program. Sometimes it goes to other agriculturally related programs. So there are examples of how to use the handling fee out there if you want to follow those up.
Yep. So any particular date that anyone has a problem with for our next meeting, or a suggestion on what day? If you have any Mondays, is Monday working out okay for most of you? Yeah, working good. So the only time I've got to be away on August 9th, that Monday, but we got the 16th, 23rd, and 30th of August. Any of those days, we'll try to work around that. Dan, have you got any suggestions on a date?
No, Bobby, I think we have to, we're getting into August, and we got to do the best we can. So if you're not available the 9th, then I guess the 2nd or the 16th.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there's an extra one in there. The second you didn't mention, Senator.
That's
Yeah.
pretty soon, though.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, to give people lead time to make arrangements so they can come and everything. So we'll, Dan and I and Linda and Michael will try to figure out a date and for on a Monday in August, and we'll get word out to you. And if you have some particular farmer that would bring us good knowledge in regards to any of these side programs that we talked about, send Linda or one of us a note, and we'll get them on the schedule.
Just talking about other states, Laura Ginsburg at the Agency of Ag spent a lot of time in Montana that has a kind of unique system. And I think she wrote her PhD on that system. She might be someone who'd talk about, what's happening in another state and why it did or did not work out.
Yeah. Well, we don't want to hear from the ones that it didn't work out in. We want to hear from ones that where it did work out. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we'll try to get that all figured out. And again, if you have any suggestions, feel free to send them on in, and we'll try to get this squared away in the next week or so, and give people ample time to plan to be with us.
And any questions you have as well, please send them along so we can put them together too for witnesses.
Yeah.
And any other thoughts that you have.
Anything else anybody wants to chat about?
can I just ask? Sorry.
Senator Starr, do you want to hold the next meeting remotely or in person? Because the State House will be open.
Yeah.
I don't know about the traveling time for people. I mean, I'd like to meet in person, but I hate to do that if, some people have got a couple of hours traveling time, and I don't know if that'll interfere with, but we could do it both ways too.
Yes, you can do it both ways.
Yeah.
You can do a hybrid.
Are you back some at the State House, Michael?
Yep, I'm in a few days a week.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about sort of having a hybrid situation, whereas if you want to come, we'll have a seat in Montpelier, or if you want to do it by Zoom, we'll do it on Zoom as well.
Let's try that. Sounds good.
Try it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was hoping that we might be able to do and work toward getting back to normality. But anyways, thanks a lot for hanging around an extra half hour. But we didn't even take a break all morning. I guess we overbooked or asked too many questions, but I thought it went very well this morning. We got good testimony. And so with that, enjoy the rest of the day, and thanks again.